AI technology enthusiast Mujin accidentally cracked open a mysterious box. He thought there would be a huge cash prize, but instead activated an AI simulation called Net. And the prize for cracking the mysterious box turned out to be a job offered to become the AI simulation's working partner. Mujin successfully logged into the system. This was already his 126th attempt to unlock the mysterious box. The system prompted him to enter the correct code. A flurry of operations like a tiger, but still resulted in an error message. Decoding failed. Unsurprisingly, the 127th attempt also failed. The system kept prompting information error, asking him to decode again. After a series of operations, Mujin finally lost his patience. He couldn't believe his skills were so weak. He had calculated everything, yet still couldn't crack it open. Moreover, it had already been 3 days. A mere box taking 3 days to crack. His brain was about to turn into mush. He couldn't understand where he went wrong. Mujin suddenly deflated. It was the first time he'd encountered such a difficult program to crack. He had always relied on participating in various AI competitions to earn prize money, maintaining his living expenses and medical costs for his leg injury. Thinking about this, he felt he couldn't give up easily. After all, there was still a hefty prize waiting for him. After saying this, he also asked the AI butterfly Xiao, Pu resting on his hand, who also agreed with him. Thinking about the prize money, Mujin immediately perked up again. With his experience, he decided to give it another try. After another round of operations, the system finally prompted that the information was correct. Activation successful. Mujin was so happy he felt like jumping 3 feet high. Heaven rewards those who persevere. He finally succeeded. Suddenly, the mysterious box began to reorganize and generate its form. Just as he was celebrating the birth of a new type of program, the mysterious box suddenly stopped moving. Mujin was a bit surprised and poked himself with his finger. The program he had spent so much effort cracking had stalled. 力破解的程序竟然卡壳了. At this moment, an image of an AI person suddenly popped out of the box. The AI person greeted Mujin, which startled him greatly. The AI person yawned, saying he had taken a long nap. Even his reactions were much slower. He asked if it was Mujin who activated him. Mujin, somewhat dumbfounded, replied that it seemed so. This seemed to turn on the other's chatterbox switch. He not only praised Mujin for being clever, but also inquired how long it took him, babbling on and on. Mujin said it indeed took quite some time, while inwardly marveling at how talkative an AI could be. The box started running again. Mujin asked what he was doing. The AI person explained that his form was still being generated and asked Mujin to wait a bit longer. Sure enough, a blinding light appeared immediately. After the intense light, the AI person said he had finished generating. Mujin was stunned. All he could see was still just the box with no changes. The AI person then realized that the audio and form hadn't synchronized yet, so he started synchronizing again. Soon a prompt sound rang out. Mujin was baffled. What's the difference from before? Seeing the box had stopped moving, Mujin leaned in for a closer look, quietly asking if he was done. Unexpectedly, someone behind him answered that he was done. Mujin quickly turned around. It was a handsome, white-haired man. Mujin was still a bit confused. The man struck a pose, sighed in relief, saying he had finally synchronized properly. He was worried the system wouldn't match him, but before he could finish speaking, a book flew at him. Mujin shouted "Ghost!" and asked who he was about to throw another book. The man advised him that throwing things was unethical. Mujin then realized that the objects couldn't hit him, and guessed he must be a holographic image. The man started to show off, asking Mujin if he was handsome. Mujin was polite, saying that as a holographic projection, he was indeed impressive and very realistic. The man continued to boast, stating that he was a new type of AI with both wisdom and ability, intelligent, and with a cool English name called Net. With a blast of confetti, the boss and Net congratulated Mujin on successfully activating the company's new program. The boss even gave Mujin a small trophy, saying the prize money would be credited soon. At this point, Mujin was dumbfounded. This was far from what he had imagined. Originally, he thought cracking the AI box would cause a sensation, gaining attention and recognition in the industry. But unexpectedly, only a few people hastily put up a banner to celebrate. The boss asked if he was super touched. He couldn't agree with his view at all. The boss immediately said it wasn't over yet. He was also offering him an internship opportunity. This time Mujin was completely stunned. He still didn't understand what was going on. The boss quickly explained that it was clearly stated in the rewards section of the previous recruitment post. Mujin said he had looked before, and there was no such thing. Before he could finish speaking, he found that there really was such a clause. He immediately criticized himself for being too careless. The boss, somewhat guiltily, explained that the company was in decline and could only recruit new people this way. Feeling deeply tricked, Mujin immediately started up his wheelchair sports car. The boss, with tears streaming down his face, tried to salvage the situation. He insisted that the company was legitimate, offering not only food and accommodation, but also medical subsidies. The mention of food, accommodation, and medical subsidies hit the mark. Mujin tried to convince himself, thinking he indeed needed a proper job to support his life. The boss continued his pitch, saying the company atmosphere was harmonious and colleagues were kind. Mujin immediately imagined scenes of academic exchanges with colleagues, suddenly feeling it wasn't so bad. Then he stated that he didn't know much about games and asked the boss if someone like him could really be hired. The boss affirmed this, saying that being able to crack Net's program was proof enough of his capability. After some thought, Mujin agreed. The boss was now moved to tears. Net, however, felt it was time to start working. The other two were still marveling at how amazing the boss was. After all, someone had finally joined. The boss introduced the company employees to Mujin one by one, saying he could ask Net about any academic questions. Net also energetically struck the cool pose. Responding to Mujin's confusion about joining so quickly, the boss continued introducing the other two colleagues. He asked Xuanyue to handle Mujin's onboarding. Xuanyue was a bit shocked, but the boss said there was no choice. The company was short-staffed. The two colleagues were still arguing with the boss. The old project wasn't finished, and now they were starting a new one. But the boss was thinking about retiring and wanted to slip away. For the first time, Mujin experienced the atmosphere of everyone working together. He found it very lively. Then Net took Mujin to a room, saying this would be his living quarters. Someone would come to arrange things later. Mujin immediately recognized it as the room where he had activated Net. He quietly thanked Net, but soon he realized that it was Net who had shown him the way. He asked where the others had gone. Net explained that the other colleagues had asked him to guide Mujin, adding that he was very familiar with the company's layout. He asked Mujin if he had any more questions. Mujin said no, but Net insisted that he continue asking. Mujin was clearly frightened and silently prayed for someone to come and save him. Speak of the devil, someone arrived immediately. Mujin was saved. Xuanyue asked Mujin to send him some onboarding information. After that, he could arrange for Mujin to move in. He also reminded him to record his entry and exit information at the entrance. After that, Xuanyue formally introduced himself, saying he was responsible for designing the game scenes for the company. Then he complained a bit, self-deprecatingly saying he was becoming more of a life manager. After that, he welcomed Mujin to the company. Mujin expressed his gratitude to him, and he left. At this moment, Mujin felt like he was dreaming. He actually had a job now. He happily shared this good news with Xiaopu. As he was talking, someone asked him what he was so happy about. Surprisingly, it was Net. Mujin immediately became nervous, momentarily forgetting that Net was still there. Net said he had nothing to do anyway. Mujin could only smile, thinking to himself that Net had seen everything just now. Net still wanted to know what he was smiling about. Mujin felt a bit embarrassed and said it was his first time being hired by a company, so he was happy. He recalled being rejected by other companies for various reasons when he applied before. Some thought his illness was inappropriate, while others felt he lacked professionalism. He could only earn medical fees by participating in competitions. But now it was different. He had a stable income and could work with everyone. Naturally, he was full of expectations. Upon learning this, Net thought it was a good thing and was happy for him too. Mujin had already started looking forward to meeting his partner. Net told him not to worry and informed him that he was already part of the new project team. Mujin was a bit confused. Net continued talking, saying that since Mujin had activated him, he would be responsible for repairing his program. Before he could finish, Mujin interrupted him, asking for the conclusion. Net directly announced the answer. Mujin's partner would be him, and only him. Mujin was somewhat incredulous, but Net was very confident, asking if he was even happier now. He then started humming a tune. Mujin found it even harder to believe. Net shrugged helplessly, saying he had just asked Mujin to ask questions, but but he didn't. As an AI enthusiast, Mujin had excellent grades and outstanding talents. Besides modifying his wheelchair, he had also developed Xiaopu, which could come at his call. Mujin thought he understood AI quite well, but Net's activation refreshed his understanding of AI. Net not only had a unique personality, but was also particularly talkative. The thought of him being his future partner made Mujin feel overwhelmed. Mujin hired a moving company to help with the move. After checking the luggage, the staff asked him to sign for confirmation. After confirming, Mujin said goodbye to the staff. Net sat on a box, watching the commotion, startling Mujin. Mujin said it was dangerous up there and urged him to come down quickly. Unexpectedly, Net was very calm and gently reassured him that nothing would happen. Net said his motion data was very stable. Hearing this, Mujin remembered he wasn't a real person and stopped worrying. Moreover, since learning he would be partnering with Net, he noticed that Net seemed to be constantly observing him. He didn't know if it was out of curiosity about humans or a built-in system function. He worried that Net might have some strange settings. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. It was two new colleagues. Mujin greeted them in confusion. Liahu introduced himself first, stating he was a modeler. Mujin calmly responded to him. Xuanyue teased Liahu, saying he was eager to introduce himself whenever he saw a pretty girl. Liahu blushed and hurriedly explained to Xuanyue that he was just greeting a colleague. After explaining to Mujin, Net deliberately called him Mr. Fierce Tiger. Liahu's face turned red again, asking how Net knew his name and explaining it was a typo. Net said it was recorded in the company's employee files. Liahu was surprised that his embarrassing moment was still preserved. He angrily told Net not to call him that anymore, but Net refused. Although Mujin found it ridiculous, he also thought Net indeed had a unique personality. In the evening, Aunt Sue called Mujin to ask if all his things had been delivered. She also asked how her work was going, genuinely happy that she had found a new job. Mujin said everything was arranged, and her colleagues had helped. Sue said her colleagues were kind people, so work should go smoothly. Mujin smiled and explained that she wasn't sure yet, as her partner was an artificial intelligence. Sue thought it was impressive and told her not to underestimate AI. She added that current AI can mimic humans very well. Mujin agreed, admitting that sometimes she couldn't tell if her partner was human or AI. Sue asked what she was talking about. Mujin felt a bit guilty, said it was nothing, and told Sue to rest early before hanging up. Then Mujin thought about Net again, thinking that no matter how realistic, it was still an AI. As an experienced AI enthusiast, she should be able to distinguish AI. She planned to study Net's system structure when she had the chance. Unexpectedly, just as she finished speaking, Net appeared in midair, startling her. It wasn't until Net greeted her that she came to her senses. She asked in surprise if he didn't need to sleep at night. He confidently said he had been helping Liahu and others with work, but was kicked out. Mujin didn't understand why he sounded so proud despite being kicked out. Net didn't mind at all and planned to drag Mujin along to watch the commotion. At that moment, Xuanyue was complaining to Liahu, asking why he changed the newly modified plant form. He then shifted the blame to Xuanyue. The two argued endlessly about the plan outline. Mujin and Net were secretly observing at the door. Net asked if she found it interesting. Mujin awkwardly agreed. Suddenly, she noticed that besides Net's vivid personality, his outline, fur, and even clothing folds were very realistic. Just as she wanted to further study his system structure, she was caught red-handed. Mujin's hand looked like it was about to touch Net's, but she was stunned herself, stammering without saying a clear sentence. Net's gaze was as determined as if he was joining the party, as if he had decided something. He then loudly educated Mujin that touching others but randomly was wrong. Although Mujin had anticipated this, she could do nothing but apologize now. Net continued his output, thinking that if he hadn't discovered it in time, Mujin would have succeeded. Mujin explained she was just curious, and since she couldn't actually touch it, what was the problem? But Net insisted it wasn't okay even if she couldn't touch it, saying she'd have to take responsibility if she did. Mujin covered her ears, saying she understood. She felt like crying, thinking she couldn't handle this AI anymore. Different types of AI have different characteristics. The intelligent tutoring type is more work-oriented. The friendly type cares more about daily life. The warm companionship type focuses more on psychology. But Net was special. He was the troublemaking and playful type. Although he was an AI designed to assist game development, he didn't care about work at all. He was the champion of fun-seeking, excelled at relaxing, and was a social butterfly. But Mujin still wanted to get on track with work quickly. Net thought for a moment and decided to assign Mujin a task. Mujin's eyes lit up when she heard about work. While Net was still thinking about what task to assign, Mujin guessed she might be fixing bugs or processing data. After thinking for a while, he finally decided to assign Mujin a great task. Mujin was full of expectations. Then he told her task was to design a cool skin for him. After a moment of anticipation, Mujin was dumbfounded. Net said he wanted to try a new look. Mujin didn't understand why an AI would have such a strange request. He said he wanted to become more handsome. Mujin was surprised, not expecting that AI people also had appearance anxiety. Net asked Mujin to try converting 2D data onto his body. He gently reminded Mujin that she could ask him if there was anything she didn't understand. Mujin quickly got into work mode. Net got his wish and put on new clothes. Mujin felt relieved. Net praised her for doing a good job. Liahu also thought the new look was nice and complimented Mujin's skills. Net said he wanted to show off his new clothes elsewhere. Liahu followed to join the fun. Mujin thought Net was being a bit vain. Xuanyue poured her a glass of water. She then said this was good, doing some preparation work before the new project started. Mujin was confused, asking Xuanyue if the new project needed this kind of work. Xuanyue said there might be a lot of code conversion work later. Mujin Sudoni understood Net's intention, but Xuanyue said this was all part of Net's job. Mujin didn't understand. Xuanyue explained that Net should indeed be put to use, otherwise the boss might think it's a waste. Mujin immediately asked Xuanyue about Net's background. Xuanyue said she didn't know either, guessing that Net was bought at a high price by the boss. She thought the company's poverty might be related to Net. While Mujin was still confused, Xuanyue said she had to leave. She came just to inform her that they could start the new project. Before leaving, she reminded Mujin to tell Net. After Xuanyue left, Mujin fell into deep thought. She felt Net's arrangements made sense. She had thought he just wanted to be lazy. Then she started to self-motivate, deciding to believe that Net's work arrangements were meticulous. At this moment, Net quietly called her over, saying the clothing data was a bit unstable and wanted her help to adjust it. Mujin felt this confirmed her recent thoughts, thinking Net was helping her practice her skills. Unexpectedly, Net just wanted to add abs. Mujin was speechless and immediately told him to be serious. She also told him about the new project. Net had to compromise, thinking the abs would have to be delayed. Mujin was playing a game and failed to pass a level. The other two expressed regret. Mujin felt frustrated, always stuck at the 7th level. The other two were even worse. Net laughed loudly at them. Liahu was so angry he wanted to argue with him, but luckily Xuanyue held him back. Mujin didn't understand why they were playing this game. Net just smiled without speaking. Then Net asked them the name of the game. Liahu quickly answered, seriously introducing the game, Little Sheep Run. He said it was the old company's signature game, and Meme Sheep was a very classic IP character. They had even released co-branded merchandise with other industries. Then Jabilia #1 brought afternoon tea, which was the co-branded Meme Sheep milk tea. Mujin said the milk tea tasted good. Xuanyue was speechless because the milk tea shop was owned by the boss. Mujin was surprised. Liahu explained that the boss indeed supported the company with the milk tea shop. He guessed it was because the company's games weren't popular, so they relied on the Meme Sheep IP to keep going. Net snapped his fingers, saying they could use Meme Sheep's popularity to promote the new game development. Then he started assigning tasks. He asked Mujin to transform Meme Sheep's character image into the most trendy current style. He also assigned tasks to Xuanyue and Liahu, saying there would be rewards for good work. Xuanyue and Liahu weren't interested in the rewards, just sighing about the amount of work. Mujin also felt the task wasn't simple. After a busy period, she sighed in relief, finally moving on to the next step. Mujin sighed, feeling the task was indeed more challenging than imagined, but at least there was some progress. He stretched and planned to rest after sitting for a while longer. Unexpectedly, Net suddenly appeared, startling him. Net asked with concern if he was all right. Mujin felt a bit guilty, saying he was fine, but inwardly felt embarrassed about being scared again. Net apologized sincerely, realizing Mujin was easily startled. He then moved closer, reminding Mujin to rest early. Mujin said the character image was still being compiled. He then showed Net his work progress. Net praised him for doing a great job and told him to rest early. Mujin said he'd rest after finishing the details. Net could only remind him not to stay up too late. Mujin promised to rest after finishing this bit. Net felt helpless and stopped persuading him. Soon, Net had a good idea. With a snap of his fingers, he created a virtual star hairpin and placed it in front of Mujin. Mujin was still confused. Net said this was the reward for doing a good job. Then, Net put the star hairpin on Mujin's head, comforting him that he worked hard today and telling him to keep the reward. Net praised Liahu for doing a great job and planned to give him a small reward. He immediately created a tiger costume, preparing to put it on Liahu. But Liahu strongly resisted, saying he didn't need it. Net wasn't going to give up, insisting Liahu wear it. Liahu said a handsome guy doesn't need such cute things. Net continued persuading, saying Mujin looked fun wearing his. Mujin looked lifeless. Net was still trying to convince Liahu to accept his reward. The star on Mujin's head was very bright. He felt he shouldn't have had any hope for Net. Yesterday, when Net showed the star, he felt very touched. But he didn't expect Net was just doing it for fun. At this moment, Net and Liahu were still arguing about the costume. Net said he had already locked them and the costumes, so struggling was useless. Liahu was finally forced into the costume. He looked speechless. Net thought it suited him very well. Liahu instantly lost his cool, threatening Net to change the costume back immediately. Net was smug because he had no physical form. Liahu couldn't hit him, so he angrily said Net was going too far. Xuanyue and Mujin were also chuckling on the side, thinking Net was really mischievous. Mujin agreed, thinking to himself that he shouldn't have felt any emotion towards Net. At this moment, the boss entered, happily asking about everyone's work progress. Xuanyue said everything was fine except that Net was annoying. The boss ignored the main point, thinking everyone was getting along very well. The boss said he came to bring everyone the new product from the milk tea shop, Cloud Meme Tea. Mujin was very happy to receive the new milk tea. Seeing Liahu panting, the boss thought he had just finished exercising and urged him to drink some milk tea to quench his thirst. However, Liahu turned to complain about Net's mischief. The boss kindly said it was normal for AI to be like this and told him to get along with Net more. Unexpectedly, the next second, Jibilia #1, who was delivering milk tea, directly spilled Liahu's milk tea on the boss's face. The boss didn't get angry, but awkwardly said he and Jibilia #1 also needed to get along better. Liahu suggested the boss change a component for Jibilia #1, but the boss thought it was fine as long as it worked. At this time, Net was looking at the new product in Mujin's hand, thinking the newly launched product looked very good. He also said the boss could make a stable profit with this new product, making the boss beam with joy. Liahu irritably told Net to modify his personality template, accusing him of being too mischievous. Net was unaware of his mischievous behavior, but Liahu remembered it all clearly. Xuanyue also felt Net often spoke without thinking. Net said he only spoke the truth. Liahu got angrier, feeling that Net's language template didn't contain any nice words. Hearing this, Net's competitive spirit immediately rose. He said he had praised Mujin for being beautiful, cute, and capable, calling him his best partner. Mujin immediately blushed upon hearing this, but vaguely remembered he hadn't heard these words before. Liahu persisted, asking Net to praise him immediately. Net deliberately called him a fluffy tiger. He really did get riled up immediately, accusing Net of deliberately flirting. Mujin also chimed in agreement. Net hummed a tune, pretending not to hear. Liahu shouted from behind, demanding him to explain clearly. Net suddenly acted cool, stating that everything he said was true. Data doesn't lie. Liahu immediately challenged him, saying he lacked complex language. Net claimed he certainly had complex language, but it needed data filtering. Unfortunately, his filtering system was flawed. When lying, problems would occur. Everyone was a bit confused. Then Net demonstrated for everyone. He said he felt very guilty about putting virtual accessories on everyone. After a burst of output, his face began to distort, his eyes full of wisdom. The three were thunderstruck after hearing this. Liahu and Xuanyue immediately complained to the boss. They demanded rectification. Although the boss also found it ridiculous, he thought it was fine as long as it worked. Mujin just quietly watched their commotion. He suddenly noticed that Xuanyue and Liehu's virtual accessories had disappeared. But what he didn't know was that the star on his head was still twinkling nonstop. In the morning, Xiaopu reminded Mujin to wake up. Mujin groggily woke up. He greeted Xiaopu. Xiaopu thoughtfully reported the weather conditions. Mujin suddenly realized that the virtual accessory on his head was still there. He didn't understand what was going on. He clearly saw yesterday that Liehu and Xuanyue's accessories had disappeared, but his accessory was still there. It had been 2 days with no sign of disappearing. He decided to ask Net for clarification. Net calmly greeted him and told him there was a new task to do. Mujin directly asked Net about the icon issue, but Net thought it was normal. Mujin pointed out that others had disappeared. Xuanyue and Liehu then realized they no longer had icons on them. Net explained to Mujin that the others were just for fun, only his was special. Mujin was a bit confused. Net said it was related to his upcoming work. After saying this, he called him away. Net showed him a high-tech gadget, saying that would be his future workplace. Mujin was a bit bewildered. Net told him to lie down first. Xuanyue helped Mujin lie down on the high-tech device. Mujin found it very curious and was examining it. The display screen showed the interface of Little Sheep Run. Mujin immediately recognized it as the game they had played before. Then Net asked if he was ready, but Mujin only heard Net's voice without seeing him. Net asked Mujin to close his eyes. The system prompted that data connection was starting. Although Mujin was confused, he had to comply obediently. The system indicated identity verification as game repair personnel. After verification passed, Mujin successfully connected to the game. Mujin slowly opened his eyes. The system prompted that he had entered a new immersive experience game. He then realized he was already inside the game. Mujin had become a little sheep, the sheep in Little Sheep Run. Net patted his shoulder to greet him. He was startled. Net appeared in front of him with a bright smile, saying he should try out the physical condition. Realizing it was Net, Mujin finally relaxed. Soon he realized that Net could actually touch him now. Mujin found it incredibly amazing that he could touch AI data. Net reminded him that he could now move freely. Mujin tried it and found he could indeed move. He then asked Net what was going on. Net explained that Liehu and Xuanyue were responsible for creating game scenes. Mujin entered the game experience through consciousness reading to fix game bugs with Net, and the star icon was the pass connecting the game and reality. Mujin finally understood the purpose of the star icon. Net stated that being his partner wasn't simple. He then asked Mujin if he was ready to start the real work. At this time, Liehu and Xuanyue were watching their interaction on the game console. They had been watching for half an hour. Net was guiding Mujin to fix bugs, saying they would only feel real after completing the repairs. Mujin found this experience very magical. He started fixing bugs like Net kneading clouds in his hands. Net asked Mujin to look at the stars coming out of the clouds. Mujin was still pondering why virtual props felt so real. As he spoke, he walked towards Net, wanted to ask about the reason. Net was a bit confused by his abrupt question. Mujin then asked about the realistic feel of the game environment. Net played coy, saying he'd tell him after finishing the work. Mujin still didn't understand why he could touch Net here. He began to wonder if Net also had human-like sensations. Net jokingly teased him. He nervously explained he was just curious. Then Net reached out his hand, suggesting Mujin touch it to determine if she had human-like sensations. Mujin thought her reasoning made sense. He began to observe her hand, feeling it was even more real than a human's. He decided to verify his guess by touching the AI humanoid in the game environment. Sure enough, the squid would be defeated. Just as he was about to touch Net's hand, a big fish suddenly appeared. This startled both of them. Standing in the shadow of the big fish, Mujin asked Net what it was. The exquisite big fish was looking at them innocently. At this moment, Liehu, who was observing from outside the game, realized it was the boss's nightmare intruding. Xuanyue reminded him to quickly close the level passage to prevent props from being damaged. Net also suddenly recognized the big fish, saying it was the final boss. He joked that it wanted to appear early. Soon the boss opened its huge mouth. Mujin was still standing there dumbfounded. Net pulled him to run for their lives. Mujin remarked that this big boss was way too big. As they fled, Net asked Mujin if running felt real. Mujin agreed, thinking it was indeed an immersive experience. But he quickly realized this wasn't the time to discuss the experience. They were about to become the boss's meal. Net scratched his head, agreeing with Mujin. Mujin felt helplessly angry, thinking she should be more nervous. Then Net wrapped his arm around Mujin's waist, telling him to get ready to jump. Mujin clearly wasn't prepared. As they leapt, Mujin realized there was a cliff below, so they went into free fall. Mujin was terrified, but Net remained calm. Fortunately, they only landed on a cloud. The boss swam over their heads. They had narrowly escaped. Net didn't expect running in the game to be so tiring. Mujin also felt that he hadn't experienced running for a long time. The heartbeat and body heat felt very real. Hearing Mujin say this, Net expressed having the same feeling. Unexpectedly, this made Mujin laugh. Mujin didn't think AI could generate heat. Seeing Mujin's disbelief, Net directly grabbed Mujin's hand and placed it on his face, smiling and asking Mujin how the verification was going. Mujin's face instantly turned red with embarrassment. Seeing this, Net quickly showed concern. The concern wasn't necessary, but it directly pulled Mujin back to reality from the game. Mujin's heartbeat still hadn't slowed down. He looked at his hand, feeling his recent experience was somewhat absurd. Mujin caressed Net's smooth cheek, not knowing how to describe the sensation. He was immersed in feeling Net's smooth skin texture and excellent contours, as well as the soft hair and thick eyelashes, sighing that it felt good to touch. Net was amused by Mujin's cute behavior of accidentally speaking his thoughts aloud. He held the hand on his face, laughing and asking if it really felt that good to touch. Mujin heard the voice and opened his eyes groggily. He saw Net lying beside him, propping up his head, gently calling him to wake up in an affectionate tone. Mujin suddenly became alert, his mind still a bit slow and flustered, asking Net why he was here. Net lay down to be at eye level with Mujin, looking at him in confusion, answering that he was here to wake him up, of course. Then Net smiled and accused Mujin of having restless hands, saying he had called him several times but couldn't wake him up. Mujin listened blankly, awkwardly apologizing to Net, saying he didn't mean to. Net smirked, telling Mujin to get up quickly, or else he'd have to use other methods to wake him. The scene shifted as Net reached out to touch Mujin's face. Mujin watched Net's face getting closer, his heart pounding wildly. Not knowing what he was going to do, Mujin stared at his lips, imagining things. Suddenly, a loud thud echoed in the room. Mujin cried out in surprise, raising his hand to cover his head as he sat up. The intense pain on his head made Mujin realize he had hit the wall. The next second, Mujin remembered Net. He opened his eyes wide and looked at the empty bed beside him. Realizing it was a dream, he took a deep breath, rubbed his head, and lay back down. What kind of dream was that? After getting up and dressing, Mujin shook his head vigorously, unable to understand why he had such an embarrassing dream. Moreover, the images from the dream were still vivid in his mind. Recalling the scenes from the dream, Mujin covered his mouth in embarrassment, still unable to believe he had dreamed about Net. The more Mujin thought about it, the more he couldn't forget that dream. He frantically slapped his face, trying to wake himself up. Finally calming down, Mujin guessed that it might be because he had touched Net's face in the game yesterday, which was why he was reacting like this now. Mujin carefully recalled that after touching Net's face, he was immediately startled awake. Stroking his chin, he became more convinced of this guess. Mujin felt that touching Net in such a realistic game environment must have been too amazing, being able to touch data, and the sensation was even more real than dreaming. Mujin kept brainwashing himself, believing it must be because Net's touch was too realistic, which is why he had such a similar dream. He was just too curious about Net's texture. While Mujin was talking to himself, constantly trying to convince himself, Net suddenly appeared, startling Mujin. Net calmly greeted Mujin, asking if he had rested well yesterday. Mujin awkwardly smiled and replied it was okay. Hearing Mujin's answer, Net was pleased. He scratched the back of his head, apologizing sheepishly, saying he didn't expect Mujin to terminate early yesterday due to not being used to the game. Mujin, feeling like he had been caught doing something bad, instantly became nervous. He mumbled a response about gradually getting used to it, then quickly ran away. Unexpectedly, Net appeared in front of Mujin again, advising him to let him know immediately if he experiences any similar discomfort in the future. Although work is important, ensuring the partner's safety is crucial. After saying this, Net smiled and asked Mujin if he understood. Looking at Net, who was very close to him, Mujin's heart was beating rapidly. He obediently answered that he understood. He slapped his blushing face hard, thinking it was all because of that dream. Now, whenever Net got close, Mujin would think of yesterday's experience. He shyly fidgeted with his fingers, his heart racing. Even now, in reality, where he couldn't touch Net, he felt embarrassed. Mujin came to his senses and tried to calmly tell Net that he didn't need to be so close when talking to him. Net looked confused. Mujin added that he could hear him. Net sheepishly rubbed the back of his head and explained that it was because he accidentally data-locked the conversation, so the target was focused. Hearing about focus locking, Mujin half understood, but he pretended to have a sudden realization and sighed in relief. He thought he was overthinking it. After all, Net was just pure data. How could he have any ulterior motives? Net, unaware of Mujin's inner thoughts, continued to explain. It was mainly because of Mujin's eyes, which were easily locked on as a target. Then Net unconsciously wanted to get closer to look. Hearing this, Mujin blinked in confusion and asked Net why with a dumbfounded expression. Net told Mujin it was because his eyes were captivating. Mujin cried out in surprise, hearing Net speak so directly. Embarrassed and angry, he punched Net, shouting "Bad AI," with a red face. Then Mujin made an excuse to go work and ran away, telling Net not to bother him. Net stood there stunned, belatedly realizing he had been hit. After running away, Mujin was still angrily cursing the bad AI, muttering about how there could be an AI that always speaks so inappropriately. Angrily turning around, intending to ignore Net, Mujin stopped halfway while controlling his wheelchair. Looking down in thought, he realized that since interacting with Net, besides his distinct personality, many of his actions had surprised and bewildered him. Especially just now, Net's sudden compliment about his captivating eyes made Mujin unsure whether to think from a human perspective or an AI's viewpoint. Finally, Mujin sighed, attributing the cause of his unusual emotions to recent experiences, making him think too complexly about Net. Perhaps that compliment was simply meant to be said. Mujin, frustrated, stopped overthinking and tried to focus on how to arrange his work time later. Thinking that Xiao Yang's image wasn't finished yet, he threw himself into work without delay. Suddenly, a male and female voice came from the door. Mujin immediately curiously perked up his ears to listen. The man was planning to invite the woman to see the city's light festival tonight. The woman cheerfully agreed, looking forward to witnessing the beautiful scenery together. As he listened, Mujin felt the woman's voice was somewhat familiar. The conversation continued, with the man telling the woman not to miss their date tonight. Mujin became more curious about who the woman was talking to, so he opened the door and peeked out through the crack. It turned out to be Xuanyue talking to an AI character. Mujin was shocked to see Xuanyue acting coy and flirtatious with the AI character. Xuanyue heard the noise, turned around, and froze when she met Mujin's eyes. Mujin apologized awkwardly. Xuanyue came to her senses, screaming that she couldn't live anymore while running away. Mujin couldn't stop her in time and called out to her retreating figure, saying he hadn't heard anything. Xuanyue ran to a corner, her mood hitting rock bottom. Mujin came to her, nervously apologizing again and explaining that he really didn't mean to. However, Xuanyue was too distraught to hear anything. She was thinking that because she couldn't resist the game's limited-time event, her cool and capable image at the company had been shattered. She had even thought about resigning. Mujin interrupted Xuanyue's wild thoughts with a frown, comforting her that things weren't that serious. Then, Mujin smiled and said that playing games occasionally was good for relaxation. Changing the subject, he said he found the game she was playing interesting and asked her to introduce it. Sure enough, hearing that Mujin was interested in the game, Xuanyue's eyes lit up. She cleared her throat to regain composure and introduced it as just an ordinary dating game. She even offered to show it to him. Mujin didn't expect it to be a dating game. He smiled and greeted the AI character, puzzled by the cute appearance but mature voice. Xuanyue explained that this was Lord Puth's limited edition image, which retained the original voice. Mujin didn't dwell on it further and asked if he could interact with the character. Xuanyue told Mujin that besides more interactions, there were many individual emotional storylines with him. With high favorability, new voice packs, and cute expressions could be unlocked. Mujin listened thoughtfully. As Xuanyue scrolled through different characters on the screen, she explained that it was actually an Otome game, so there were other characters to choose from. Mujin immediately got excited and asked to see them. Xuanyue pointed out a very popular character that she didn't dare to pursue for Mujin to see. Mujin glanced at it and thought it was quite cute. Xuanyue explained that she wasn't interested because it looked too much like Net. Indeed, mentioning the resemblance to Net immediately caught Mujin's attention. Upon closer inspection, he felt they weren't that similar. The AI character began praising Mujin nonstop, from his hair to his eyes, sweetly saying he was cute and as sweet as a flower. Mujin suddenly remembered Net complimenting his captivating eyes. Embarrassed, he quickly retracted, saying this character did resemble Net. Xuanyue agreed, saying she always felt there was a similarity but couldn't pinpoint it. Maybe it was the hair color or the mannerisms. She concluded that their system modes might be similar. Mujin asked, confused, system modes? Xuanyue explained that it meant their personalities were set to be talkative, so they seemed to have commonalities. Mujin had a sudden realization, guessing that Net's cheesy lines were all data-derived. Xuanyue agreed that was probably the case. Then she caught on and asked curiously what strange things Net had said to Mujin. Mujin awkwardly avoided the question. Mujin understood that there was no need to dwell on the meaning of Net's words because it was just his data and personality setting. After this realization, Mujin hesitantly asked Xuanyue if they shouldn't care about the meaning behind AI characters' words. Xuanyue replied that even knowing their words were derived from big data calculations, she still felt happy when the characters spoke to her. Mujin then looked at Xuanyue intently, suggesting that this shouldn't be considered worthless. Mujin thought Xuanyue's words made sense. Regardless of the meaning behind the words, Net's speech did make him quite happy. Suddenly, Net appeared behind them, startling both Mujin and Xuanyue. He shouted that he caught two people slacking off at work and immediately said he would dock their pay. A commotion ensued at work, and they couldn't help but sigh that most of Net's words were still troublesome. Net seriously reminded everyone to work diligently, saying it was his supervision time next. Mujin thought about how Net almost overheard them talking about him. Xuanyue thought about how Net almost saw her playing the game. Both sighed in relief at their narrow escape. Work mode Net came online, saying the game's core part wasn't finished yet, and urged Mujin and Xuanyue to hurry up. Just then, their male colleague Liehu appeared with coffee. One second he was marveling at everyone's work enthusiasm. The next he heard a cold voice saying dock pay, and his face changed dramatically. Mujin thought to himself that indeed, most of the time Net's speech was normal, but he would suddenly say something shocking, so it was better not to pay attention to his words. Net exclaimed dramatically, "This gorgeous figure is simply too captivating." Mujin turned around with a confused look, not knowing who Net was talking to. Gorgeous figure? The latter half of the sentence definitely matched the #1 toxic prop in the game. This scene is simply amazing. Net praised the scene props for being very well made. Everyone's reaction was cold. Net insisted, saying it was really fascinating. Net's speaking style, with its strange pauses, involuntarily made Mujin lose focus. Mujin lowered his head in frustration, admonishing himself not to pay too much attention to Net's words. He took a deep breath to relax, telling himself that this was just a small trick of AI speech. At this moment, Net mercilessly pointed out that Xuanyue's props, if put on the market, would be simply too ugly. In the instant Mujin was stunned, Net added the second half of the sentence, "too ugly too." This type of prop style is very unique. His words stunned Mujin. Xuanyue expressed dissatisfaction, saying it was because Liehu's modeling was too rough and she had to clean up and optimize the details herself. Net agreed that Xuanyue had a point. Fortunately, he was there to follow up, otherwise Liehu would have to be personally. This unpredictable speech pattern, with its pauses, successfully made Mujin misunderstand again. Sure enough, what Net wanted to say was personally teach how to model properly. Mujin, embarrassed and angry, told Net not to pause randomly when speaking. The more Mujin thought about it, the more ridiculous it seemed. He always heard half of what Net said, resulting in a bunch of nonsensical interpretations. He forced himself to focus, reminding himself to work hard and absolutely not be swayed by an AI's words. So, Mujin, with a determined look, forced himself to concentrate, manually activating his defenses and blocking out all sounds. His fingers tapped incessantly on the keyboard. Mujin's absorbed work state shocked everyone. He kept reminding himself to focus, suggesting that other things were irrelevant to him. Only the work in front of him mattered. Only working hard to earn money was the right way. Mujin frantically hit the keyboard, and finally a beep sounded. The AI character of Little Yang appeared on the screen. After waiting for the beeping code conversion, Mujin successfully completed the Little Yang character, drawing a round of admiration. Liahu excitedly said he finally saw the latest code image of the little sheep. At this moment, the little sheep blinked its big eyes. Net praised it for being cuter than imagined. Then, Net said the new image fit the current aesthetics very well. He happily announced that the game project could now enter the next phase. While saying how small and cute the little sheep was, Net reached out to pat its head. Unexpectedly, his finger was bitten hard by the little sheep. Seeing Net being bitten, Mujin felt much better. Liahu praised Mujin for completing the little sheep's transformation ahead of schedule, saying it was really great. Mujin said it was too much praise, thinking that as long as he focused, he could remain calm no matter what Net said, and work was no problem at all. After a fierce battle, Net finally caught the little sheep in his palm. He told Mujin that to celebrate his early completion of the task, he could give him a small reward. Mujin pointed at the star on his head in confusion, asking if that wasn't the reward. Net told Mujin that the star originally belonged to him, and the real reward had been carefully considered for a long time. Unexpectedly, Net took out an alarm clock, proudly stating that the reward was his wake-up service. Mujin was shocked and speechless. Net smiled and asked if it wasn't full of benefits. Speaking of the wake-up service, Mujin recalled the night he had a beautiful dream. Coming back to his senses, Mujin directly refused. Net was deeply hurt, saying he was super punctual in waking people up. Mujin blurted out that he already had little poof. Net persistently tried to sell his wake-up service to Mujin. Mujin firmly refused. In the end, Mujin was still affected by Net's words. He started imagining Net's wake-up service, which involved standing at the bedside and banging a gong to wake him up. Little Yang introduced himself. His name was Angelou, the protagonist of this pixel game. As someone who had been dominating the game world for decades, the big boss Angela didn't know why he appeared in this world in such a form. Angela found this meh sheep appearance very strange. Moreover, these humans kept calling him by other names. Everyone talked to Angelou all at once. In the human's eyes, the little sheep didn't respond, possibly due to a glitch. In reality, Angelou was disdainful, thinking this appearance was terribly outdated. Mujin analyzed that the little sheep couldn't speak because it didn't have a language system module. Net said perhaps it could only express itself through actions. Angelou angrily wanted to know what the bunch of data constantly flashing before his eyes was. Compared to how humans saw it, that pile of data looked absolutely hideous. So, filled with rage, Angelou inexplicably took a dislike to Net's hair and bit Net hard again. Net sighed, realizing it wouldn't be easy to get close to him. Liahu also asked worriedly how they could get the little sheep to cooperate with their work in this situation. Xuan Yue responded that they might need to let him understand their situation first. Liahu suddenly exaggerated to attract the little sheep's attention. Hearing him call out meh sheep, the little sheep angrily stated that he was Angelou. However, what came out was just a meh sound. Liahu showed Angelou some data to prove that he was very famous in this world. Not only were there many brands collaborating with his image, most importantly, he even had his own exclusive milk tea shop. Finally, Liahu kindly asked Angelou if he felt their love for him. Unexpectedly, Angelou directly destroyed that data, shocking Liahu. Angelou snorted, saying it was indeed a boring place. He arrogantly stated that he was the protagonist who dominated the entire game and had no time to fool around with them. After Angelou finished speaking, he left, leaving Liahu in tears, grateful that the data could still be recovered. However, after just a few steps, Angelou was suddenly grabbed and lifted into the air, terrified and demanding to be put down. Net wagged his finger, telling him he couldn't escape after doing bad things. Then Net rubbed his chin, deep in thought, wondering why he couldn't get close to Little Yang. Mujin suggested that it might be better if they brought him into the game. After pondering, Net thought it was feasible, stating that although the game was still being repaired, it shouldn't have any impact. Angelou was horrified to realize he didn't know which game he was being taken to. While he felt uneasy, his fate had already been decided by Mujin and Net. Then Net introduced Mujin to Angelou as the person responsible for repairing him. He sternly warned Angelou to behave and listen obediently when they go into the game together. Mujin smiled and greeted Angelou. Angelou disdainfully stated that he wouldn't listen to them. Angelou considered himself a true man who had been through hardships and fought alone. He confidently expressed that he wouldn't be constrained. Mujin felt that Angelou didn't like him and Net very much. Net smiled, forcefully holding down Angelou's body, denying that the little sheep was unhappy, and told him to say hello. Mujin was skeptical, but said hi again. Angelou, unwilling to be controlled by a mere human, angrily roared at Mujin, trying to make him understand that women only slowed down his gun-drawing speed. Unexpectedly, the sound Angelou made was Mom. Hearing the little sheep call Mujin Mom, everyone was stunned. Angelou was also startled by the sound he made. Net quickly reacted first, happily saying that Angelou calling Mujin Mom must be because Mujin transformed the little sheep. So, the data automatically defaulted to his relationship with Mujin. Mujin was surprised that AI could have this kind of relationship. Net thought Angelou's performance was sincere and decided to take him directly into the game. Angelou only saw two dark shadows approaching him. Although they told him the new environment was suitable for him, he felt their smiles were malicious. He screamed in terror, "No!" The system prompted successful entry into the new immersive experience game, Little Sheep Run. As soon as Angelou entered the game, he looked at the scene before him with wide eyes. He thought it was absolutely amazing. Net and Mujin were delighted to see Angelou rolling around on the ground in the game, enjoying himself. Angelou heard Mujin ask how he felt in the game. He cleared his throat and expressed great satisfaction. Arrogantly, he decided to reluctantly lead this realm. Immediately after, Angelou was picked up again. Net held the little sheep in his hand, smiling as he announced the start of new work progress. Angelou frantically twisted his body, telling Net to put him down so he could walk on his own. Unexpectedly, Net suddenly threw Angelou out. With a thud, he crashed into a pile of props that Liehu had just repaired. Net hurriedly apologized to Liehu. Angelou frantically cried, "Meh meh meh," breaking down in tears when he realized no one could hear him speak. Liehu and Xuanyue only thought the little sheep was being noisy and annoying, increasing their workload again. Mujin put in a lot of effort to repair the cloud props again. Meanwhile, Net, the culprit who trampled the cloud, was now angrily shouting at the little sheep, Angelou, to get up and work. Seeing that Net was actually supervising others' work and not slacking off, Mujin felt gratified. Net took out the latest game prop made by Xuanyue and handed it to little sheep Angelou, tempting him to put on the prop and catch stars. Seeing Angelou still uncooperative and dawdling, Net apologized patiently, then forcefully made him put on the prop quickly. Finally, Angelou put on the new prop, looking utterly hopeless. Everyone praised him for turning anger into motivation and determination, vowing to catch all the stars and crush them. Net smiled as he watched Angelou leave, reminding him to remember to collect many stars. Mujin didn't understand why the Meme sheep needed to catch so many stars when they weren't officially playing the game. Net smiled and answered that firstly, catching stars was what the little sheep was best at, and secondly, it was a good opportunity to centralize the repair of star props. Mujin suddenly realized they were using Angelou as a tool sheep. Suddenly, Net and Mujin heard a thud. They looked up to see Angelou falling down with a bang. Net said a cloud had caught Angelou, so he was fine. However, Mujin noticed with a serious expression that many cloud props were starting to run unstably. Net realized that was why he had shattered the cloud with just a light step earlier. It couldn't withstand any force at all. Soon, Mujin discovered that the cloud beneath him was becoming unstable again. Net worriedly told him to come down quickly. Mujin had originally wanted to test the cloud's load-bearing capacity, but encountered instability first. He could only jump off the cloud, disappointed to wait until next time when it stabilized to try again. As a result, just as Net helped Mujin land, they watched in horror as the ground clouds cracked with a ka sound and began to split. Mujin fell into the large crack that opened in the clouds. Net hurriedly told him to be careful, but it was too late to stop it. Mujin fell rapidly downwards, finally landing in a place that saved him from disaster. He got up, seeing stars, and was shocked to find that the ground clouds had also collapsed. Seeing that Mujin had a close call, Net hugged him tightly, feeling scared in retrospect. Mujin mistakenly thought he had crashed into Net in his panic and hurriedly apologized. In reality, Net had quickly cushioned Mujin's fall, and they were lucky to encounter clouds that hadn't malfunctioned, allowing them to land safely. Mujin belatedly realized their position. Embarrassed, he twisted his body, wanting to leave Net's embrace, but found he couldn't open his eyes. Mujin gently reminded Net that they had already landed safely and suggested it was time to get up. Net came to his senses and released Mujin, apologizing that he had been too engrossed in talking. Mujin stood up, his face red, trying hard to calm himself. He brainwashed himself, thinking that protecting his safety was just Net's job. He convinced himself that Net's data must have been delayed, which was why he forgot to let go. He scolded himself for overreacting unprofessionally. To divert his attention, Mujin looked around, trying to find a way back up. Net looked at Mujin, then lowered his head to look at his own hands. He sat down, scratching the back of his head, pondering the new sensation he experienced when holding Mujin. He found it very intriguing. Later, Net lay on the cloud with his hands behind his head, eyes closed. He quickly opened his eyes again in confusion, unable to comprehend exactly what the feeling was. Net stared at his hands, silently pondering the puzzling events he encountered today. Due to the accident, Net had hugged Mujin, seemingly generating new, unfamiliar data. According to past experience, after triggering an event, data would be processed and analyzed to obtain final information and draw conclusions. However, Net didn't know why, but this time, countless data flooded in, yet it generated information he couldn't compute. Suddenly, Mujin's exclamation woke Net up. It turned out Mujin had finally repaired the big hole that had caused him to fall. Mujin rubbed his shoulder, muttering that this repair was super sturdy, guaranteeing the cloud would never collapse again. Net quietly approached to observe Mujin. To his surprise, he found that his magnetic field didn't seem to have much interference. He couldn't help but wonder if it was because of the simulated tactile sensation. Just then, Angelou the sheep stomped his foot to remind Mujin and Net that he had returned. Indeed, Mujin heard the sound, turned around to see Angela back, and was overjoyed. Angelou was wiping sweat, exhausted. Mujin was surprised he had collected so many stars, praising him for his hard work. Angelou threw the props to Mujin, proudly showing off his abilities. Suddenly, Net grabbed and hugged him. Angelou angrily bleated, but Net discovered that hugging the little sheep didn't give him that sensation. Mujin didn't understand Net's sudden action, mistakenly thinking the hug was a reward for Angelou. The next second, Mujin saw Net rush to hug a cloud, not knowing what he was up to. Only Net knew that he still didn't experience that sensation, because the simulated tactile feelings of hugging the little sheep and the cloud didn't cause any abnormal calculations for him. After the experiment, Net understood the issue still lay with Mujin. Meanwhile, Mujin stopped paying attention to the playful Net and smiled as he took the star crown from Angelou. He began to check if any of these stars needed repair. Net stared at Mujin in utter confusion, watching him quietly repair the stars. He couldn't help but wonder if this seemingly cute and gentle human girl might be a potential dangerous AI killer. Mujin tried to repair one of the stars and asked Net to help check if there were any problems with the star he repaired. However, he found Net completely unresponsive, staring blankly. Net was horrified to discover that his head was filled with echoes of Mujin calling his name. Not knowing what kind of sound wave interference this was, he feared that he could now be affected by sound waves. After waiting for a long time without a response, Mujin was puzzled and turned to ask Net why he didn't come over. At this moment, Net smiled, turned gracefully, and quickly answered that he was coming. But in his heart, he thought he was in trouble, feeling like he had been poisoned. Mujin pointed at the screen, telling Net that he had tried a method to repair the stars and wasn't sure if it was correct. He thought there shouldn't be any major issues, but to be safe, he wanted Net to check it. However, Net wasn't listening to Mujin. He found himself constantly processing data when near Mujin. Yet, unable to compute the information, he kept repeating the calculations over and over again. Net even had the thought of wanting to trigger the event again. Lost in thought, Net's vision gradually blurred, no longer focusing on Mujin. Mujin turned back to ask if he had heard what he said. He found Net standing blankly behind him. Net barely snapped back to reality. Net's hand, reaching out to hug Mujin, stopped midway. He frantically grabbed the star instead. Changing the subject, he praised Mujin for doing an excellent job on his first star repair. Mujin was surprised to find that Net had glitched. He remembered thinking that Net only acted this way when lying. Could it be that he was sarcastically implying Mujin did a poor job? Mujin was thunderstruck, feeling his professional abilities were being questioned by Net. He angrily shouted at Net to be serious and point out any problems directly. Net blankly replied that all his praise was genuine. Hearing this, Mujin became even angrier. He grabbed Net's collar, telling him not to joke around. Net pitifully said he wasn't joking. Afterwards, Net started avoiding Mujin as if he were a virus. Mujin angrily chased after him. Seeing the childish pair, Angelou coldly remarked, "Two idiots." Net's mind was filled with thoughts of staying away from the suspected virus, Mujin. So he walked away quickly, his footsteps pattering. Mujin chased after him, panting and asking him to slow down. Hearing this, Net didn't stop, begging Mujin to stop chasing him. While chasing, Mujin kept telling Net to stop. Net refused, saying he'd be caught if he didn't run. They continued this chase for a while. Finally, Net shouted for Mujin to stop, saying he just thought Mujin was acting strange today. Mujin replied, "Of course." Net explained he was avoiding Mujin because he might be carrying an interference virus. Hearing this, Mujin was stunned, unable to believe he was a virus. Net nervously told Mujin about his abnormalities, distraction at work, confused speech, failed calculations. These were enough to prove that contact with Mujin was potentially harmful. Moreover, it only targeted AIs with an undetectable magnetic field. Mujin was shocked. Net continued his nervous analysis. He believed it must be a side effect of experiencing too much simulated tactile sensation. Net expressed relief at discovering it in time, fearing unimaginable consequences otherwise. Mujin interrupted Net at this point. Hearing him mention simulated tactile sensation, he surprisingly asked if Net could feel touch in the game. Net seriously explained that mutual touch in the game is maintained through a balance of virtual energy. Then, Net turned away, muttering to himself that he never thought simulated tactile sensation would have side effects. At this moment, Angelou suddenly ran in front of Mujin. Net noticed Angelou was about to report to Mujin. Worried that Mujin might experience the same situation as himself, he anxiously shouted, "Danger!" and rushed over to protect her. Angela gave Net a disdainful glance. Mujin saw that Angelou was completely normal and realized there was no virus at all. Net was extremely embarrassed, weakly arguing that his judgment couldn't be wrong. This time, Mujin was furious, scolding Net for talking nonsense. Net's survival instinct kicked in, explaining that he really did sense an anomaly. Mujin didn't believe him. He questioned Net, asking why he didn't consider that perhaps his own information reception was unstable. Net instinctively denied this, arguing that his information reception was super stable. Net told Mujin that he could receive the same tactile sensations as humans for any scene props in the game. To prove his point and demonstrate how easily he could obtain tactile information, Net vigorously described the softness of clouds and the elasticity of gorillas. He even grabbed Angelou, saying he could be squeezed like a doll. Mujin took the opportunity to get closer, asking Net why he was different in terms of touch if he was just receiving information. Net instantly stiffened, stammering for a while before finally blurting out, "Don't you want to touch?" After these words, there was dead silence. When Net came to his senses, he threw Angelou away. Covering his head, he painfully stated that this couldn't go on and hurriedly went to repair himself. In a flash, Mujin only saw a system prompt to exit the game. Net instantly disappeared from his and Angelou's sight. Angela grumbled that Net was toxic and neurotic, suddenly startled by Mujin. Mujin was bewildered by Net's behavior, first saying he was a virus, then saying he wanted to touch him. It was simply unforgivable. Mujin came to his senses, lips tightly pressed, angrily shouting that Net was a bad guy and should never appear before him again. Then Mujin also successfully exited the game. After exiting the game, Mujin stood up, holding his forehead, his head aching from Net's antics. He never thought an AI would become abnormal due to receiving tactile sensations. He decided never to believe Net's nonsense again. Suddenly, Mujin was shocked to discover that his injured foot could move. At this moment, Net was busy self-checking and repairing. The next day was bright and sunny. After a night of repairs, Net appeared radiant and boasted proudly that no other AR could achieve such efficient and quick repairs. Net wanted Mujin to see his repaired state, but no one paid attention to him. He then noticed Xuangyue and Liehu sneakily looking at something. Liehu turned and quietly asked Net if he was looking for Mujin. Net proudly said he wanted to show him. He had come back perfectly repaired. Liehu pointed in a direction, telling Net that Mujin was currently seeing a doctor over there. Net was about to say there was no rush if Mujin was seeing a doctor. But then he saw a handsome male doctor holding Mujin's ankle, the two chatting and laughing together. Net's expression instantly changed, shocked and devastated. On the other side, Mujin apologized to Dr. Shui for his special visit. Dr. Shui assured him it was no trouble, as he was on his way to see other patients anyway. So Mujin comfortably asked Dr. Shui if his foot moving a bit might be related to his work. Dr. Shui, while injecting medication into Mujin, asked in return if he meant that this subconscious activity affected his physical body. Then Dr. Shui seriously replied that although they couldn't be certain yet if the work influenced Mujin's condition, given the current situation, the foot's response was a good sign. Mujin excitedly confirmed. Dr. Shui told him that his work might even help stimulate nerve movement. Mujin was overjoyed and determined to work even harder. It could both aid his recovery and help pay for medical expenses. Dr. Shui also laughed heartily, saying that Mujin's work suited him well. It seemed to involve many fresh activities, especially the star headpiece decoration. Mujin suddenly remembered the star on his head. His ears turned red as he explained to Dr. Shui that it was a work tool, not a decoration. Dr. Shui smiled and complimented that it was very cute. Mujin then expressed, on the verge of tears, that if Dr. Shui hadn't mentioned it, he would have forgotten. He had been wearing this thing for so many days. Xuangyue and Liehu were secretly watching Mujin and Dr. Shui chatting and laughing. Xuangyue belatedly asked why they were spying. Liehu gestured for Xuangyue to lower her voice, saying they just happened to come by to show concern. He asked in return if she wasn't curious about Mujin's condition. Xuangyue coldly replied that if Liehu was so concerned, he could go ask directly. Liehu awkwardly answered that Mujin hadn't mentioned it, so he didn't feel comfortable asking. Xuangyue thought Liehu had a point. Then she figured Net could definitely go ask. Liehu hesitantly said that might not work. Net seemed to have crashed from the shock. In the lobby, Mujin slowly tried to stand up with Dr. Shui's support. Dr. Shui gently asked how he felt. Mujin excitedly said he could barely move now. Dr. Shui told Mujin not to be discouraged. He patiently explained that although the snowflower virus was a new disease in recent years, they had been researching treatments, so it could be gradually overcome. Then Dr. Shui advised Mujin to move his foot appropriately in daily life, which would help suppress the spread of the disease. Mujin acknowledged this. At this moment, Net suddenly spoke up sarcastically. "Okay, doctor, I got it too." Dr. Shui looked at Net in confusion as he squeezed between the two. Net introduced himself familiarly as Mujin's work partner. Standing in front of Mujin, Net stated that he, as an all-capable AI, would assist with everything the doctor had just instructed. Dr. Shui said he understood and then mentioned it was getting late and he should leave. While helping Mujin sit down, he reminded him to move around more and come for regular checkups as before. Mujin and Dr. Shui said goodbye to each other. Net sensitively noticed that Dr. Shui said Mujin had always been coming to see him. He couldn't help but ask Mujin if he had always seen Dr. Shui for treatment before, emphasizing if he went alone. Mujin, still angry about yesterday's incident, defiantly said Net didn't need to know. Net expressed disbelief, stating that as Mujin's work partner, he should of course know about his schedule. Mujin pointed to the star on his head and asked Net if, as a work partner, he could hide this star. Net didn't understand, asking wasn't it fine like this? Mujin angrily said it wasn't fine at all, that wearing this star in the real world was very strange. The content of Mujin and Net's argument. Liehu didn't catch a word of it. Xuangyue said it was boring and she was leaving. Unexpectedly, as soon as Xuangyue turned around, she bumped into someone. The things in her hand fell to the ground. Dr. Shui quickly apologized to Xuangyue and helped pick up the things on the ground. Xuangyue heard Dr. Shui's voice and her eyes widened instantly. This voice was exactly like Lord Puth's. Xuangyue excitedly and shyly covered her face. She couldn't believe she had heard a voice just like Lord Puth's in reality. It was incredibly pleasant to hear. Liehu asked with concern why Xuangyue had suddenly stopped. Xuanyue cleared her throat, regaining her cool demeanor, and said it was nothing. She just felt the surrounding environment had suddenly become much more melodious. Liahu suspected there was something wrong with his ears. Mujin and Net's argument was so loud, yet Xuanyue said it was melodious. Mujin is an AI research enthusiast. Due to a disease affecting both his feet, he has difficulty walking and relies on a wheelchair for daily mobility. To pay for his foot treatment, he works at a game company called Freezer. Unexpectedly, due to work-related reasons, Mujin's feet's ability to recover was awakened. After the doctor's diagnosis and advice, he now needs to exercise for recovery. Mujin silently cheered himself on and then made a rehabilitation exercise plan. For example, he proposed to do more running during his game work today to collect stars. Mujin thought that perhaps the amount of exercise in the game would be beneficial for his foot's recovery. The original plan was perfect, but they didn't expect Net's unexpected participation. Plans can't keep up with changes. In the game, Mujin walked with both feet on the ground while collecting stars. Net's sudden appearance not only startled Mujin, but he also mercilessly pointed out that Mujin took 3,005 seconds to collect stars for one level. He said with disdain that it was too slow. Mujin instinctively apologized to Net, but halfway through, he realized he didn't need to apologize as Net hadn't requested it. Net told Mujin not to worry, proudly saying he was very professional. As his perfect partner, of course he would help him complete his daily training. Mujin remembered the previous incident. Angrily, he refused Net's help, saying sarcastically that he wouldn't dare let him be his coach. Net learned it was because he had previously mistaken Mujin for a virus. He sincerely apologized, admitting it was his misjudgment. Mujin angrily accused Net, saying his touch didn't feel good. After apologizing, Net blurted out that Mujin actually felt nice to touch. This sounded strange, and Mujin was momentarily stunned. Net seized the opportunity to tell Mujin that to show his apology, he should diligently help him train. Mujin thought Net was exaggerating and politely said it wasn't necessary. As a result, LAD misunderstood, thinking Mujin preferred to be supported during training like the doctor did. He immediately said this was also possible, and that he would be available 24/7, ready to assist at any time at Mujin's command. After hearing this, Mujin, embarrassed and angry, loudly said it wasn't necessary. In the game, he could walk by himself. Net trembled, not daring to argue. Mujin's rehabilitation plan unexpectedly encountered these small incidents in the game. Because of this, Mujin felt that real-life training could be better arranged. So, Liahu brought Mujin to the company's small gym. Mujin was very happy, thinking the gym looked quite nice. Liahu assured Mujin he could carry out his daily training, as the boss had already ordered specialized rehabilitation equipment. Net chimed in, saying the equipment idea was his suggestion. Not only that, Liahu said, he and Xuanyue had installed some handrails around the empty walls of the room, making it convenient for Mujin to move around and train at any time. Mujin was pleasantly surprised. Net continued to seek praise, saying the handrail idea was also his suggestion. Liahu said everyone sincerely hoped for Mujin's legs to recover soon and wished him a quick recovery. Mujin hadn't expected everyone to be so concerned about him, especially Net, who had proactively made those suggestions. He was particularly touched and sincerely thanked them. Liahu, while playing on the parallel bars, reminded Mujin that the company was quite empty and quiet on weekends, good for focused training. Xuanyue told Liahu not to play around. Mujin seriously stated that he would arrange his training time well on weekends. Xuanyue asked Mujin if he needed someone to accompany him, wondering if he'd be okay alone in the gym on weekends. Mujin nodded, about to say he'd be fine alone. Net suddenly interrupted, saying he was there too. He firmly stated that he was now Mujin's 24-hour training partner. Liahu immediately said it was reassuring to have a companion. Net guaranteed that he was a very responsible partner. As a result, Mujin was forced to let Net accompany him in real life as well. He was surprised to find that Net was even more motivated than himself. With little impact on reality, Mujin finally compromised and let Net stay. Believing that his enthusiasm was just about fulfilling his role as a partner, he decided to forgive him. Net asked Mujin if he would get abs by training along with him. Mujin told him he wouldn't. Looking at his silly appearance pretending to pant, Mujin felt exasperated and suddenly didn't want to bother with him anymore. Mujin's rehabilitation plan was progressing enthusiastically. Over these few days, following Dr. Shue's examinations and advice, as well as everyone's encouragement for Mujin, inspired, he decided to double his efforts, not wanting to waste this rare opportunity. Mujin instructed his assistant to update the weekly schedule and add new items. According to the schedule, during working hours from Monday to Friday, Mujin would exercise while working, using the game environment to increase his physical activity. On weekends, Mujin would train in the company's gym. For example, after meals, he would walk using the parallel bars. Net would supervise and watch over the entire training process in real time. Mujin set a small goal for himself, to be able to walk basically with both feet. Rehabilitation exercises would still be done according to plan. Mujin asked Net and Angelou to complete today's physical tasks. The supervisor then set off, full of enthusiasm. 20 minutes later, Mujin noticed that the clouds in the game seemed to need repair. He ran over and fixed them. Another 10 minutes later, the stars over there also seemed to need repair. Mujin ran to check. An hour later, Mujin had checked multiple places and put the repaired items back in place. Mujin was excessively active, while Net and Angelou, as supervisors, sat leisurely, almost falling asleep. They completely failed to fulfill their supervisory role. Suddenly, Mujin tripped and fell to the ground. Net approached worriedly. Mujin indicated he was fine and could continue practicing. Net insisted that he had been active enough these days. Mujin still wanted to continue, but Net firmly disagreed, telling Angelou to do the physical work instead. Mujin felt that with this amount of exercise, the effects would likely be very noticeable. Continuing like this would definitely aid recovery, he silently cheered himself on. So in the following days, Mujin persisted in practicing day after day, constantly telling himself he could do it. On Sunday, Net saw that Mujin had been training for a long time and couldn't help but advise him to take a break. He said it wasn't necessary. Net disagreed and told Mujin that properly arranging rest time was also very important. How could he not rest? Just then, Mujin's left foot tripped his right foot, and he almost fell. Fortunately, he immediately grabbed the parallel bars. Net asked if he was okay. He said it was probably because he had been training too much lately, but he was fine and could continue. Net urged Mujin to rest, but he said he wanted to practice by himself for a while. Net blinked and could only agree. After Net left, he recalled the last thing Mujin said to him. It was clearly just the literal meaning. Why would it generate other information that he couldn't calculate? He was confused. What emotion was this exactly? Net wondered if it was because he hadn't been repaired properly before. Then he immediately denied it, thinking it was impossible. He believed his system was super powerful. Then Net guessed that perhaps it was because of his contact with Mujin that many new data points were always being generated. Net thought alone for a long time. He found it difficult and couldn't understand why strange data kept popping up. Suddenly, Net heard a bang from inside the gym. He immediately flashed in and found Mujin lying on the ground. Net anxiously asked Mujin if he was okay. Mujin said in a calm tone that he'd be fine after lying down for a while. Net didn't believe it at all. Looking at the situation, it was obvious that Mujin had fallen. He quickly squatted down, intending to call medical staff for help. Mujin repeatedly insisted that he was really fine, covered his eyes, and begged Net to just let him lie down for a while. Then Mujin curled up with tears in his eyes and chokingly told Net that he was just a little tired. Mujin turned his back to Net, telling him he was just tired and there was no need to call a doctor. Net asked again if he really didn't need one. After receiving an affirmative answer, Net seriously asked Mujin why he was crying. Mujin no longer hid the fact that he was crying. Net stood still, staring blankly. The disease affecting Mujin's feet was called the snowflake virus. Its symptoms were just like its name, cold crystallization spreading outward from the embryonic point, like branches gradually blooming inside the body, freezing it and making it unable to move. Mujin originally thought that facing this disease, he could only watch it progress, letting it spread or be suppressed. No matter how the symptoms developed, he could only obediently rely on medical rehabilitation. All Mujin could do was work hard to earn money to pay for medical expenses. But since Mujin came to this game company and experienced running in virtual reality, everything seemed to have a new glimmer of hope. In reality, his feet had also improved, and he could participate in fighting against the disease. There were also the blessings and encouragement from everyone. At that moment, Mujin felt he had enough courage to overcome the illness, full of fighting spirit. However, reality wasn't as simple as he imagined. Mujin composed himself, wiped away his tears, feeling he was too inadequate. Despite carrying the hope of recovery and everyone's encouragement, he started to lose his composure because there were no new signs of improvement. Hearing Mujin say he was inadequate, Net disagreed, saying Mujin had been doing useful things all along. He gently listed Mujin's efforts one by one, working hard, practicing, striving for recovery. Finally, he said Mujin was underestimating himself too much. Mujin then realized that Net had been listening to him all along and was so close. He shyly covered his face, not knowing how to face Net. Mujin regretted saying so much at once. Hurriedly trying to cover up, Net said he was just talking to himself earlier and told Mujin not to take it to heart. At this moment, Net became even more curious and leaned in closer. He was surprised that humans could cry like this, teasingly saying he thought Mujin was crying because he hurt himself from falling. Mujin felt both shy and embarrassed, even more at a loss. He hurriedly denied and explained that his emotions just suddenly got the better of him. Net sighed, saying Mujin had given him new calculations again, and he had to think about which comfort mode to activate. Mujin was instead amused by Net. He first apologized for scaring him, then said he was fine now, no longer crying, and there was no need to activate any comfort mode. It was better when he wasn't laughing, but once he started, it really scared Net. Mujin was again tickled by Net's reaction and couldn't stop laughing. Soon, Mujin took a deep breath and found that speaking out made him feel much better. He belatedly realized he had been pushing himself too hard lately. Recovery was originally a long process of adjustment. Training should be done gradually in accordance with the body's condition. After understanding this, Mujin smiled and told Net he felt much better now, telling him not to worry. Net skeptically confirmed, and Mujin assured him he really felt much better and thanked him for his comfort. Having finished feeling down, Xiaopu comforted Mujin by suggesting he reward himself with a cup of milk tea. So Mujin told Net they would end the practice for today. Net stared at Mujin talking to Xiaopu, saying she was crying one moment and laughing the next. She either made his calculations fail or added new doubts. As he spoke, Net lowered his head and leaned in close to look at Mujin's eyes, saying directly that he was truly difficult for him to figure out. Looking at Net's face so close, Mujin's heart couldn't help but beat wildly. Net suddenly spoke up, asking Mujin if he could tell him why. Mujin looked bewildered. Net rephrased his question, asking Mujin to tell him why she was so difficult to figure out. Then, Net asked why Mujin's eyes always made him unconsciously fall into them. He wanted to find answers in his eyes, but always found himself unable to continue thinking. Net was unaware of his charm and insisted on getting to the bottom of it. Mujin's face turned red with embarrassment. Stuttering, he answered that emotions can sometimes be easily affected. It's normal and not hard to understand. Even though Mujin said this, Net was still half skeptical. He said he knew these principles, but why was he still constantly generating a bunch of unreadable data? This situation only occurred with Mujin. Mujin sat up, looking for slippers, and asking Net to wait a moment. He wanted to try if he could stand up by himself. Watching Mujin actually stand up on his own, Net felt very conflicted, asking himself if these messy data really needed to be sorted out. Fluctuating yet affecting operations. The troubles they brought ultimately pointed Net towards which answer? While pondering, Net had already stood up and was beside Mujin. Mujin turned his head, saw him so close, and nervously asked what he was doing. Net just stared at Mujin, saying he didn't know either. He only knew that too much unfamiliar data had accumulated now. He wanted to skip the tedious calculations and directly realize the answer. Mujin, confused, asked what answer he wanted to realize. He didn't know what answer required Net to constantly get closer to him, and lowered his head in embarrassment. He asked Net what he wanted to do, knowing his feet couldn't move. Net tilted his head and asked Mujin why his face was red then. Net said Mujin knew he couldn't touch him. Or was he now like himself, with confused thoughts? Net's finger caressed Mujin's face. Mujin was at a loss for what to do. The next second, he heard the system warning. System overload. Immediate forced exit executed. Then Net vanished from in front of Mujin in a flash. Mujin took a deep breath, his heart pounding. Her face was flushed red, not knowing what the situation was. The next day, Monday at work, Liahu energetically greeted everyone and announced a small group meeting. To his surprise, Net, usually seen everywhere, was nowhere to be found. The system told Liahu that Net was in the repair room. He was surprised that Net was under maintenance again. Liahu hurriedly ran to tell Mujin this big news, asking him to check why Net kept breaking down recently. But Liahu was scared to see Mujin stiff and dazed, mistakenly thinking Mujin had broken down too. He hurriedly ran off, crying, to find Xuanyue. At the group meeting, an invitation from Quirky Amusement Park was displayed. The invitation featured 4 handsome PAI characters, each saying romantic lines. They invited the princess to accept their heartfelt invitation. It turned out to be V Company's 10th anniversary limited event. The girls were excited seeing the invitation. Liahu was shocked that V Company's AI dating anniversary celebration was so popular. Xuanyue tried to stay calm, saying it couldn't be helped since the characters inside were very likable. The straight-laced Liahu couldn't understand. Now it's popular to be lovey-dovey. How did sweet talk become so appealing? Xuanyue immediately hit Liahu in anger. She forbade him from speaking carelessly about them. Xuanyue angrily said that after all, these were game characters they had put effort into creating. She told Liahu to respect their peers. Liahu made another straight-laced comment, saying if V Company only made such shallow characters, even Net could go work there. It was clearly a joke, but Mujin started seriously considering the feasibility of Net competing for oil. The argument between the two brought Mujin back to reality. Xuanyue said disdainfully that Net probably didn't even have the most basic qualifications. Liahu asked what qualifications. Xuanyue answered that of course, his actions should make people feel heart-fluttering. Mujin started to relate this to himself and overthink. Liahu dejectedly responded that this indeed seemed to be lacking. Net's personality was too mischievous, only making people angry. Xuanyue excitedly questioned Liahu. Did he think being a hunter was easy? Liu didn't understand why Xuanyue was so excited. Xuanyue realized and explained that she was just very serious about the game work. Mujin slapped his forehead, embarrassedly realizing that he had indeed been influenced by Net again and started overthinking. At this point, both Xuanyue and Liahu noticed Mujin's blushing and both expressed concern for him. Mujin smiled and said he'd be fine after a rest. Xuanyue's eyes confirmed if Mujin was really okay. She said that while Net was under maintenance, Mujin could help with some easier tasks in the afternoon. He could also come to the break room to rest during lunch. Liahu curiously asked what break room. Xuanyue said he didn't need to know, then announced the meeting was over. When lunchtime came, Xuanyue played a game, praising the AI character Puth for being great and irreplaceable, criticizing Liahu for not understanding anything. Puth smiled and said he was in sync with Xuanyue, praising her as irreplaceable in his heart too. Finally, she unlocked another affection level with Lord Puth. Xuanyue screamed in excitement. Suddenly someone knocked on the door. Xuanyue mistakenly thought it was Mujin and excitedly shared that she had another exclusive emotional storyline with Lord Puth. But when she turned around, she found it was Liahu who had entered. Stunned, Liahu finally understood why Xuanyue was so excited this morning. It was because she was their devoted fan. Xuanyue cried out that this time she really couldn't go on living. In her agitation, the game console accidentally slipped from Xuanyue's hand and fell to the ground. The screen went dark, causing Xuanyue to break down, shouting that her Lord Puth had disappeared. Mujin arrived at the break room just then, apologizing for being late. Noticing the strange atmosphere in the room, he asked what had happened. Liahu explained that he might have accidentally entered and scared Xuanyue. Then the game console broke. Xuanyue suddenly stood up fiercely, aggressively wanting to hit Liahu. With a twisted face, she demanded him to give back her Lord Puth. Liahu was so scared he kept calling for help. Mujin interjected, saying if possible, he could try to fix it. Xuanyue immediately looked at Mujin with hope. Mujin explained that he had repaired many machines before, so this shouldn't be a big problem. Xuanyue decisively handed the game console to Mujin, telling him that it now got stuck at other locations when turned on. Mujin said he would try to repair it tonight. Liahu leaned in to observe, surprised that the character's image had glitched. Then he thoughtfully said that this character looked quite similar to Net up close. Xuanyue dragged Liahu away to work, angrily forbidding him from mentioning this game again. Suddenly, the AA character Ruby reappeared, greeting Mujin, calling him despicable, then said a jumbled mess of words. Mujin barely understood that he was saying the despicable one was startled. Don't be afraid, I'm here. Mujin was surprised that even though the character was broken, it was still saying such mushy things. Ruby stuttered, saying what if he's broken? His heart for him remains unchanged. Mujin blushed instantly, remembering Matt saying they were all broken. At night, Mujin diligently repaired Shuang Yue's game console at the company. After a long time, he finally fixed it. He took a deep breath, installed it, and tried to see if it could run. With a beep, it started up. Ruby returned to Mujin in full health. After a thorough check, it seemed there were no problems. He thought it should be fixed. Mujin accidentally clicked on another case. The system prompted that Ruby's affection level had increased, activating the next stage of the emotional storyline. He was very panicked. Ruby then spoke. He was very happy to be liked by Mujin and thank him for repairing them. To show gratitude, Ruby hoped Mujin would let him offer his most sincere kiss. After saying this, he kissed Mujin's hand. Mujin quickly withdrew his hand in horror, questioning why Ruby also liked to kiss people randomly, just like Net. Ruby retorted that he doesn't kiss people randomly. Of course, he kissed Mujin because he liked him. Mujin hesitantly confirmed, "Because you like me?" Ruby answered, "Yes, I only kiss people I like. How can you say it's random?" Mujin didn't believe it, questioning how Ruby, as an AI character, could understand liking someone. Ruby put his hands on his hips and coldly snorted, asking Mujin why he couldn't understand. More importantly, what did he think? Mujin asked blankly, "You?" Ruby nodded, then asked if Mujin liked him too. Mujin didn't know how to answer. Then he saw options to choose whether to like or not appear on the screen. Mujin rubbed his eyes, thinking he was seeing things. He had hallucinations. He decisively exited the game. Mujin gazed at the starry sky, involuntarily wondering if Net would say such things. Soon Mujin yawned, realizing it was late. Fighting sleepiness, he remembered that because of that day's incident, Net should still be under repair. Then he thought that Net was just an AI. He shouldn't have any expectations. Finally, unable to resist drowsiness, he closed his eyes. Net asked Mujin if he was still troubled by his matter. Hearing the voice, Mujin suddenly opened his eyes, shocked at how Net suddenly appeared before him. Net asked Mujin why he hadn't sorted out his feelings for him yet. Clearly, Mujin was also confused at that time. Hadn't he already given an answer then? Mujin excitedly denied it, explaining that it was because Net suddenly got so close and said those things. He blamed Net for always talking nonsense, making him dizzy. Net held up one finger, telling Mujin that these weren't the point. The point was, had Mujin's heart fluttered because of him? Mujin realized and asked himself if he had ever had his heart flutter for Net. Xiaopu suddenly appeared, reminding Mujin it was late and he should go to sleep. Hearing Xiaopu's voice, the confused Mujin was suddenly awakened. Mujin was ashamed of his behavior just now, seeing game characters as Net again and himself. Thinking of Net's appearance, he slapped his face several times. With a red face, Mujin self-suggested that he must be too tired. Then he felt frustrated again, feeling too embarrassed to face Net. The next morning, Shuang Yue turned on the game console. Puth appeared safe and sound. He happily greeted her. Shuang Yue was especially glad he was alright. Shuang Yue thanked Mujin, saying the game console was working normally now. She said she'd treat him to meme tea later. After saying this, Shuang Yue instantly reverted to her cool demeanor, stating that after the check was complete, it was time to get back to work properly. Then Shuang Yue casually mentioned that Liehu went to find Net. She wondered why Net was already repaired, but they hadn't come back yet. After saying that, she prepared to take Mujin along to check. Mujin was conflicted inside. He wondered if it was too soon. He wasn't ready to see Net yet. Now, whenever Mujin thought of Net, his mind was filled with images from that day and Net's smiling face. He anxiously pondered what to do, trying hard not to overthink. Shuang Yue turned back and asked Mujin why he wasn't coming in. He had unconsciously followed them to the repair room. Mujin slapped his face, forcing himself to calm down. He couldn't start overthinking just because he saw Net's face. He tried hard not to give himself away, determined not to let Net notice anything unusual. After adjusting his emotions, Mujin turned and asked Net what was wrong. As a result, he saw a blurry figure greeting him. Mujin was stunned. He asked what was going on. Net explained that because this repair consumed too much energy, he was temporarily unable to generate a human form. Liehu exclaimed in surprise that Net looked too strange now. Net forbade him from talking about his initial form. Mujin asked Net how long it would take to recover. Net said he didn't know. estimating maybe another day or two. Mujin sighed, thinking this was fine too. At least Net's current form wouldn't make him imagine any strange scenes anymore. Suddenly, Liehu screamed in shock, saying that Net couldn't walk now, so he couldn't come to inspect their work. Net replied that the company's network was too extensive for him to connect, so he couldn't go anywhere now. Liehu asked what they should do, as the boss would scold them. Net said he could only connect to small-range, movable electronic products now. Perhaps this way, he could temporarily recover. Liehu pondered about a device that was both movable and could connect to equipment. Xuanyue commented that it was troublesome. Mujin directly asked what device. Xiaopu suddenly appeared, stating that Mujin was a movable and connectable device. Everyone was stunned. They all had a false alarm, realizing the device Xiaopu meant was actually Mujin's wheelchair. After connecting successfully, Net found the data quite stable, compatible with the wheelchair circuitry. Liehu praised that connecting to Mujin's wheelchair worked well. He reminded Net that he could only follow Mujin around for this period. Net said this was the only option. Then Net leaned in to thank Mujin, saying he'd be in his care for these 2 days. Mujin was too shy to look at Net's face. His hands nervously fidgeted with his clothes as he tried to stay calm. Inside, he was delighted, thinking they'd be together for so long. Liehu said resignedly that Net's operation had been unstable lately and needed maintenance. He urged him to recover quickly. Net awkwardly said it was because he kept encountering things beyond his cognitive range. Then he expressed relief that Mujin wasn't hurt while he was away for repair. Otherwise, he'd be an incompetent caretaker. Mujin was bewildered. Net explained that he had found Mujin lying on the ground that day. His emotional fluctuations were a bit intense, exceeding his recognition range. So at that time, he was recalled for repair. Xuanyue and Liehu silently observed the drama. Mujin was surprised to find that Net only remembered being recalled at that time. He didn't remember the later events that had confused Mujin's feelings. Mujin didn't know if Net really didn't remember what happened later that day. He was angry, wondering how Net could not remember. Hearing Net mention that day's events, Xuanyue and Liehu took turns criticizing him for being irresponsible. Then they asked Mujin what happened after he fell. Net said he couldn't remember. Mujin angrily pursed his lips. Unable to hold back his thoughts, he shouted at Net, "How could you?" Everyone was confused. Mujin cursed Net as an idiot. He angrily questioned how the stupid AI could forget. An angry Mujin was terrifying. Everyone was scared. Net reluctantly asked what he was talking about, saying he didn't understand. Hearing this, Mujin angrily turned away, saying he wouldn't talk to Net anymore. He shouted that Net could go with whoever he wanted. It wasn't his business. Net was even more confused. Because he was connected to the wheelchair and being dragged along, he frantically asked Mujin to slow down. Mujin told Net to get lost, then disconnected him. He said he didn't want to see him again. Xuanyue and Liehu quietly watched the whole scene. They said to each other that they seemed to smell a hint of gossip. Net recently encountered a difficult problem. He felt like he had made Mujin angry. The reason for the anger started from when Net was recalled for repair. Because too much unknown data about Mujin had accumulated, it activated a passive function. At that moment, he was forcibly shut down. But from Mujin's words, it seemed that Net had continued to operate unconsciously afterwards, and something had happened between them. However, Net didn't know why. After the repair, he couldn't search for the subsequent memory data. After another failed attempt to read the data, Net temporarily gave up. He decided to let Mujin cool down first. He couldn't let him keep ignoring him like this. Beep, beep, beep. During the game work, Net frantically praised Mujin, saying his prop repair skills were getting more and more proficient. The entire game scene was integrated perfectly, as expected of his dedicated partner. Faced with Net's string of compliments, Mujin didn't even turn his head. He coldly replied that it was just work, then ignored Net again. Net praised again, saying it was mainly because of Mujin's strong business ability. But Mujin still didn't respond. He was completely unmoved by Net's praise. Angela finally couldn't help but burst out laughing. Net threw Angela far away and told him to go work. He angrily said Angela talked too much and wouldn't let him come back until he collected all the stars. Mujin didn't know what was wrong with himself. Net forgetting what happened afterwards was something he should have understood. Because of that abnormal behavior, being deleted and repaired by the program, and such, this kind of situation would indeed happen. No matter how angry Mujin was, it wouldn't help. Net told Mujin not to be angry anymore. He said he would definitely try hard to find the lost memory data. He wouldn't let Mujin bear this alone. Then Net tugged at Mujin's sleeve, acting coy and begging for forgiveness. He pleaded not to be ignored. Mujin took a small step back. He coldly said it wasn't necessary. He told Net not to deliberately look for that data. What happened that day wasn't a big deal. Moojin told Net this was enough. He said he had been too harsh. Data repair naturally tends to delete some abnormal data. Yet Moojin was still blaming Net for not remembering. Net was also managed and repaired by the system. Then Moojin smiled and apologized to Net. He said he wouldn't quarrel with the system anymore. Net sighed that Moojin was still difficult for him to figure out. Moojin noticed that the display on Lad's chest had turned red. He didn't know what was wrong. He asked with concern if a lady was okay. Lad realized that his current feeling was as troubled as that day. Those disordered data should have been repaired, right? He didn't understand why it now seemed like he hadn't returned to normal. Seeing Net not responding for a long time, Moojin wondered if he had started again. Net then tilted his head and came back to his senses, asking Moojin what had started. Moojin hesitated to speak. Each event had to be simulated according to the program to be considered valid. If a result couldn't be calculated, it would be simulated again. But the data accumulated in Net now couldn't be simulated no matter how it was repaired. So Net thought, since it couldn't be calculated no matter how much it was computed, it might as well ignore it. After all, repeatedly computing unreadable information would only cause Net's program to crash or lose data. It's better to skip the process directly. Hearing Net say it would skip the process directly, she cautiously stepped back, wondering if it would be like that time with exchanging answers. Net asked Moojin why she suddenly stepped back. Moojin hurriedly said it was nothing. The more she did this, the more Net wanted to get closer, asking Moojin what was wrong. Moojin insisted it was nothing and told her to continue. Net instead asked her to listen carefully. Moojin kept backing away rapidly while saying she was listening. Net pursued closely, asking why she kept retreating. Suddenly, Moojin tripped nervously while backing up. As she was about to fall, Net quickly caught her. Due to inertia, Moojin fell into Net's arms. Net held her tightly, gently reminding her to be careful and not fall again. Moojin steadied herself and stood up straight. To her surprise, she found that Net's chest display had turned red again. Moojin poked Net's chest with her finger. She was about to tell her about this when she realized how close they were. Net looked down and asked her what she meant. Moojin, blushing, stammered that it had turned red. Moojin then realized that this feeling was the same as last time, meaning Net had fallen into an unconscious state again. Moojin knew this couldn't continue, worried that Net would be forced to return again. In a panic, Moojin raised her hand and slapped Net. Net fell unconscious. The system service was forcibly interrupted. Net suddenly woke up. The system was reconnecting. Dazed, Net asked Moojin what she did. Moojin quickly apologized, but inwardly felt relieved that Net hadn't disappeared. She wasn't sure if it was just her imagination, but Net's words and actions just now seemed to be repeating what she had forgotten that day. Boss Bravo suddenly appeared at the company. He applauded, praising everyone for the high completion level of the game. It was perfect, he said. Liahu joked that if the boss hadn't come to see it now, they might have already released the game. The boss awkwardly said he had been busy managing the milk tea business. Xuanyue and Liahu immediately gave him a look of silent accusation for neglecting his duties. The boss could only awkwardly change the subject to Moojin, asking how her recent work had been and if she had adapted to the new work mode. Moojin replied that she had adapted. The boss said it seemed she had developed a good rapport with Net. Moojin laughed, talking about Net in a perfunctory manner. The boss asked Moojin where Net was, as he couldn't see her. Moojin said Net was still in the game. The boss asked why. Moojin made up an excuse, explaining that Net was probably still processing data. She didn't dare say she had slapped her. Hearing that Net was so diligently processing data, the boss felt very pleased. Then the boss excitedly wanted to go into the game to personally communicate with Net. He could also see the company's pet, the sheep meme's image. Liahu surprisingly asked the boss if he really wanted to experience the game. The boss had already quickly lain down. He said he could act as a player and experience the game's charm in advance. Liahu reminded the boss to be careful once inside, because the game wasn't fully completed yet. Although the boss said it was no problem, Liahu still decided to keep an eye on things from the back end. Moojin sat there with a dazed look in her eyes. Xuanyue approached and asked if she had something on her mind. Moojin asked if it was that obvious. Looking at the blushing Moojin, Xuanyue said she had been distracted the whole time. She asked if it was related to Net. Moojin answered that it was indeed about Net. Then, Xuanyue quietly suggested they go to the break room to talk. Moojin hesitated, saying the boss was still there. Xuanyue said it was fine. The boss would probably be in the game for a while, so they weren't really needed. Mujin was still hesitant. Xuanyue said he had actually been observing her for days. She always seemed distracted and conflicted. Xuanyue told Mujin that keeping it in would be bad for her, and she should talk to him. Mujin blinked, looking at Xuanyue with gratitude. She told him the whole story, explaining that this was roughly how things were. Then Mujin said that everything that had happened between her and Net recently left her confused and perplexed. She asked Xuanyue what he thought she should do now. After listening, Xuanyue was stunned. Mujin asked worriedly if he was okay. Xuanyue said he was fine. He was just shocked to learn so much at once. He never imagined that Net would have data similar to emotions. In Xuanyue's impression, although Net's personality was very distinct, it should all be based on data settings. He actually generated data for Mujin that exceeded the calculation range, as if he had developed feelings for her. Mujin said blankly that she didn't know if this was like either, because whenever Net encountered similar data, he would be forcibly returned and that part of his memory would be deleted. Then he would act as if nothing had happened, repeating those abnormal behaviors. Mujin asked Xuanyue confusedly if this wasn't just caused by data errors. Xuanyue snapped his fingers, firmly denying it. He said it was quite obvious. Xuanyue told Mujin that if abnormal data is deleted by the program, but the abnormality repeats, from a human perspective, wouldn't that mean he would fall for this person no matter what? It's exciting to think about, an AI developing feelings, breaking the original calculation model, but still unable to find answers in its confusion. Xuanyue, who already had a girlfriend, got more and more excited. Mujin urged Xuanyue to calm down, saying it might be due to other reasons. Maybe it was because they could touch each other in the game, so it might generate some data that disrupts judgment. She thought maybe that's why she felt strange too. Xuanyue pinched Mujin's cheek in frustration, saying she had it backwards. Of course, it was because feelings developed first that the touch became so significant. Then Xuanyue said interestingly that besides Net, Mujin was also deeply involved without realizing it. Mujin felt as if Xuanyue had revealed her true feelings. She realized she hadn't been paying much attention to her own reactions. Looking back now, she wondered if she had also fallen deeply into it. Xuanyue sat down again and asked Mujin if she still hadn't figured it out. Mujin said no, thinking that maybe Xuanyue had a point. She might need to organize her thoughts properly. Xuanyue told Mujin to take her time and to share any troubles with him. Mujin instantly felt relieved and thanked Xuanyue. Xuanyue happily took out his game console to show Mujin his favorite character, Lord Puss. So today, the employees shared their feelings, talked about their hobbies, played some games, and spent a leisurely and peaceful afternoon. Meanwhile, the boss got lost in the game, constantly calling for help, seemingly becoming the busiest person today. After a long time, the boss finally managed to escape from the game with great difficulty. Liahu apologized to the boss, saying he hadn't noticed him in the back end. The boss hugged Liahu tightly, crying that he had almost been eaten. When Xuanyue and Mujin returned, this was the scene they encountered. The boss tearfully recounted his experience in the game, saying that if Net hadn't found him in time, he might have become the game boss's dinner. Net told the boss that if he had been eaten, he would have just automatically exited, but the boss was still very grateful to him. The boss suddenly realized something was off and asked why Net looked like this when he exited. Net said it was a long story. The system repair had been a bit slow recently, so he could only look like this for now. He couldn't even move around. The boss immediately asked what was broken and if it needed to be fixed. Net said it would be fine in a couple of days. The boss said he hoped so. Mujin listened to the conversation between the boss and Net, thinking that Net hadn't recovered. Could it be that he broke down again because of her punch? Mujin glanced at Net from the corner of her eye, and their gazes met. Net immediately grinned. Mujin turned her head angrily, thinking Net was an idiot for being so happy after she hit him. At that moment, a guest suddenly arrived at the company, so everyone went to see, leaving Net alone and ignored. The guest handed the boss an invitation to V Company's 10th anniversary game festival. Everyone eagerly asked if they could all go. The V Company boss put down his coffee. He said he came specially today to deliver the invitation to Freezer Company. If everyone wasn't busy, they were welcome to come and experience the games at the event. The three employees saw an elegant and handsome Asian man before them. It turned out to be the boss of V Company's games, dazzling and wealthy. Each of the three employees received an invitation, watching the two bosses engage in business flattery mode. Soon the three gathered excitedly to discuss. Both sides chatted separately. Mujin's lack of excitement stood out. As a newcomer to the industry, he was curious about V Company. Was it the game company that had released some very popular games in recent years? Liu said that was correct. Then he told Mujin some inside information. Apparently, when CEO Shui was younger, he had left their small company to start his own business. Now he had made his company famous. Xuanyue added that Lord Puss was from their Otome game. Although Mujin was surprised that V Company had released many hit games, what surprised him more was that Liu and Xuanyue were more excited about the rival company than their own. Suddenly, Net appeared, accusing everyone of discussing another game company behind his back. Everyone turned around, stunned by Net's new appearance. It turned out that Net, who couldn't move, had to temporarily use Boolean number 1 circuit. After saying this, Net snatched the invitation from Liu's hand, wanting to know what everyone was discussing. Liu told Net that V Company had specially delivered invitations, inviting them to attend the 10th anniversary celebration event. Net immediately expressed excitement, saying he wanted to go too. Liu was surprised about how Net would go. Net replied he'd go just like this. Xuanyue said Net probably wouldn't need a ticket since he was an AI. Hearing this, the boss told everyone to go and see. He said it was a rare opportunity to attend such a game festival. It was perfect for everyone to see games made by other companies. Soon everyone started discussing how Net should go. Connected to Boolean's machine, the model was probably too old to walk that far. Mujin suddenly spoke up, suggesting that Net connect to her wheelchair. Net happily asked Mujin if she had stopped being angry and if he could really connect to her wheelchair. Mujin replied that she had stopped being angry long ago. She was extremely happy that Net could go with everyone. Mujin thought that perhaps Xuanyue was right. She was already deeply involved, even though the Net she faced now was a machine, whether pixels or AI. No matter what form, she could no longer calm her heartbeat. After successfully connecting to the wheelchair, Net returned to his human form. Xuanyue looked at the two with an ant-like smile. Net told Mujin that connecting to his circuit was more flexible. He smiled and said he would behave and stay by her side, not going anywhere, but following her. Mujin came to her senses, embarrassedly disconnected, and shouted who told Net to connect now. Then Mujin turned and left. She said to let Net connect again before departure. The scene of being sent back felt familiar. Xuanyue and Liu both criticized Net for being too impatient. Her heart was beating uncontrollably. Mujin now knew her feelings, but didn't know what to do. Soon it was time for V Company's 10th anniversary game festival. On this day, Mujin and her group arrived at the venue, amazed by the bustling scene of the large crowd. Along the way, Xuanyue asked Liu if he noticed that they seemed to have been watched the entire time. Liu narcissistically said that people probably knew they were from Freezer Company. After all, it was an established company with a reputation that hadn't diminished in the industry. Halfway through his sentence, he abruptly stopped. Liu had bumped into someone. A group of fangirls surrounded Net. Xuanyue then realized that they were all attracted by Net, which was why they were looking at their group. Xuanyue hadn't expected that Net could still attract some hunter fans. Liu had said before that Net's image could work well among hunters. Xuanyue disdainfully stated, no matter how handsome, he's not as handsome as Puss. Seeing Net so popular, only Mujin's lips were tightly pressed, very unhappy. Her fingers unconsciously tapped on the wheelchair. Net crossed his arms, answering the fangirls' questions one by one. He stated that he prohibited photos, touching, and that he wasn't a character from the game. No matter how handsome, it wasn't allowed. Net was suddenly recalled to Mujin's side. Mujin told everyone that Net was their company's AI, and it wasn't convenient to take photos. Then she politely left with Net. Net followed behind, repeatedly asking Mujin what she meant by her earlier words. Mujin brushed it off, saying it meant nothing. She changed the subject, urging everyone to quickly get to work, and then tour the exhibition. The staff warmly welcomed everyone to the Doomsday Express special venue, then enthusiastically started speaking. They introduced that everyone could engage in a new image interaction, immersively experiencing Doomsday survival. There were realistic zombie compliments, intense gunfights, generous point rewards, and a super experience full of excitement and thrills in Doomsday Express. Mujin's group couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. It was Mujin's first time seeing this, and she was very interested. She muttered to herself that although it looked a bit scary, this game seemed very interesting. Net noticed Mujin's eagerness and asked if she wanted to play. Mujin said it probably wouldn't be convenient for her. The staff on stage asked if any player wanted to try it out. Net immediately raised his hand, saying he and Mujin wanted to play. The staff saw Net and Mujin as an interesting combination and decided to let them play. Mujin, wearing the equipment, asked uncertainly if it was really okay. She worried that playing in a wheelchair would be strange. Net said he would control the wheelchair, so it would be fine. He told Mujin to just focus on shooting zombies. The staff explained to Mujin that this game was very easy to pick up. She just needed to try to shoot the zombies with the gun and earn points. The higher the score, the better the reward she could exchange. Mujin indicated that she understood. The staff announced that the Doomsday survival battle would now begin. Meanwhile, while Mujin and the others went to play the game, Xuanyue secretly slipped away from the crowd. He prepared to carry a big bag and go on a shopping spree for Lord Puss merchandise. He was so happy, he didn't know where to start browsing. Seeing Lord Puss's limited edition doll, he thought it was too cute and that he could buy 100 of them. Suddenly, Xuanyue heard someone nearby praising how exquisite Puss's doll was. He happily agreed. He told the person to grab one quickly while there weren't many people, or they'd be sold out soon. Xuanyue belatedly realized that the person he was talking to was actually Liehu again. Xuanyue asked in horror how Liehu was here. Liehu casually said he had been following him all along. Then, holding the doll, he said the more he looked at it, the more it resembled Net. Xuanyue asked about Mujin and the other person. Liehu said the two of them were now playing the game with great enthusiasm. They might even complete it. Back to Mujin's side, she was very engrossed and excited playing the game. Seeing too many zombies increasing in front of her, she told Net to quickly retreat. Unexpectedly, Net suddenly said he couldn't see anything. Because data could interact with each other, Net was surrounded and bitten by a group of zombies. Net, unable to tolerate it anymore, angrily exploded. He decided to control the wheelchair and play dead. As the wheelchair passed through the zombies, the score kept increasing. The two created a new way of playing. The staff explained that this wasn't how the game was meant to be played and asked Mujin and Net to stop. After the game ended, remembering Net's strange tactics, Mujin couldn't stop laughing. She said who would directly use a wheelchair to attack Data, and the ridiculous thing was that they could still score points. Net stated that it only showed their game wasn't good enough and was full of bugs. When giving out prizes, the staff said Mujin and Net played well, but asked them not to play like that next time. Thinking of the prize, Mujin looked up and said it was thanks to Net's tactics. She took out the limited edition Little Prince Ruby pillow, saying she had interacted with this character before and found her quite cute. Hearing that Mujin had interacted with Ruby and called her cute, Net immediately said they should exchange for a different prize. Mujin firmly refused to exchange, saying Ruby was more articulate than Net. As Mujin and Net were arguing about whether to exchange the doll, Dr. Su suddenly appeared. 20 minutes earlier, the V Company boss, seeing the lively festival scene, expressed satisfaction that the event was very successful. The boss's nephew suddenly knocked on the door. It turned out to be Dr. Xue. CEO Xue was happy to see him come. Dr. Xue said if he didn't come, he'd be disrespecting his uncle too much. CEO Xue was worried he'd get moldy, always cooped up in the lab, so he kindly reminded him to come out. CEO Xue said Puss was very popular now. Seeing these young girls so enthusiastic, he suggested maybe arranging a character prototype meet and greet for Dr. Xue. Dr. Xue refused, stating he only provided basic voice materials for the team to expand on, and there were still differences from the character. He didn't want to break the girls' love and impression of the character. CEO Xue laughed awkwardly, saying he was just joking. He was only worried that Dr. Xue thought about work all day. It had been a long time since he dated, and he urged him to start dating. Dr. Xue suddenly saw Mujin in the crowd. He told CEO Xue he was going to meet a friend. CEO Xue was surprised that the workaholic actually had friends to meet here. Back to the main story. Mujin learned that Dr. Xue came with a friend. She said it was quite a coincidence to run into Dr. Xue at the Game Expo. The two chatted happily while Net squatted nearby, sulking. Dr. Xue asked Mujin how she had been lately and if her foot had improved. Mujin smiled and said she was doing well. She had been following the advice to walk more. Although practice was a bit difficult, she was slowly adapting. Dr. Xue reminded Mujin to come for a checkup when she had time. Then Dr. Xue asked Mujin if they were about to go play games now. Mujin said they had just finished playing and were now going to find their companions. Dr. Xue offered to accompany Mujin to find her companions since he had some free time. Mujin hesitated, worried about inconveniencing Dr. Xue. He assured her it wasn't a bother and offered to push her wheelchair. Just as Mujin was about to agree, Net suddenly flashed in and pushed the wheelchair away. He said there was no need to trouble Dr. Xue with controlling the wheelchair, as he, the all-capable AI partner, could handle it. Net boasted that after all, he was connected to Mujin's wheelchair and could control it at any time. After saying this, he immediately pushed the wheelchair away. Meanwhile, Xuanyue received his packaged goods and exclaimed that today was a great harvest. He had gotten many limited edition merchandise items. When it was Liahu's turn to pay, Xuanyue heard him tell the cashier not to wrap the items. Xuanyue was shocked to discover that Liahu was also buying. He had been so caught up in his shopping that he almost forgot Liahu had been following him the whole time. Halfway through, Xuanyue stopped, gritting his teeth. He didn't know what Liahu's intention was in following him around the merchandise area. It was bad enough that Liahu knew about his interest in the game, but now he was following him shopping and buying merchandise too. Xuanyue wondered if it was because Liahu was usually serious and strict at work, so he wanted to take this opportunity to tease him. Xuanyue came to his senses and angrily grabbed Liahu's collar, demanding to know his purpose. Liahu was confused. Xuanyue asked why he kept following him, wondering if he found it amusing that he liked playing the game, or if he was looking for a chance to make fun of him. Liahu innocently said he was just curious. Xuanyue became angrier, saying it was none of Liahu's business what he liked, and accused him of causing trouble. Liahu also got angry. He said that they had been work partners for so long, yet Xuanyue always had a stern face or an angry face, scolding and snapping at him like an old witch. Changing his tone, Liahu said he never expected the usually cold-faced Xuanyue to have such a cute hobby and could show such a smiling face. He said Xuanyue was 10,000 times cuter than usual. Hearing Liahu's mushy words, Xuanyue ran away with a red face. It was as if he had stepped on a bomb. Net noticed that his calculated data seemed to be becoming chaotic again. He felt very unhappy seeing Mujin and Dr. Xue together. Unexpectedly, the game coins they had earned from playing earlier could be used for a lottery draw. Mujin happily inserted the game coins. Although the chances were slim, she still hoped to win a prize. Otherwise, the reward for completing the game with Net would be wasted. Net stared at the figures of Mujin and Dr. Xue. He was unhappy about how close they were standing. Net then wondered why he should care about how close they were standing. It was truly perplexing data to him. Mujin belatedly realized it was getting late. She anxiously wanted to meet up with Xuanyue and the others. Dr. Xue agreed. Mujin then turned and called Net to set off to find the others. After circling the hall, they still hadn't run into Xuanyue and Liahu. They wondered where they had gone. Dr. Xue suggested they might also be moving around. The exhibition hall had a circular design, with the end of the exhibit being the exit. He proposed waiting at the entrance, thinking they might run into them. Net agreed with Dr. Xue's suggestion, then wedged himself between the two of them as they set off. Mujin didn't understand what Net was doing. Net said he was obviously joining their conversation. Mujin said this way of joining was strange and asked Net to change his position. Net firmly refused. Suddenly, a beeping sound was heard. Net leaned in and asked Dr. Xue what was wrong. Dr. Xue explained it was work information from the hospital. He had to go handle a new work project. Dr. Xue apologized that he couldn't wait with them. His friend had arrived. Mujin said work was important. Net pretended to sincerely say that it was too bad. Dr. Xue escorted Mujin to the exhibition entrance before preparing to leave. He reminded Mujin to contact him anytime if she felt unwell. Mujin smiled and thanked him. After saying goodbye at the less crowded entrance, Mujin sighed in relief. She told Net they'd rest here for a bit. They'd see if they could wait for Xuanyue and Liahu to come out. If not, they'd go look for them. Net didn't respond after she finished speaking. Mujin turned her head to see him looking upset. She quickly asked what was wrong. Net asked Mujin dejectedly why she always smiled at Dr. Xue, and so happily at that. Mujin explained blankly that because Dr. Xue was always friendly to everyone, she had to be polite and friendly in return. Then Mujin added that Dr. Xue was her attending physician. He had given her a lot of help medically. Naturally, she was happy because with his help, she could be the Mujin she was now. Net sincerely asked if that was really the case. Mujin confirmed it was. Net then scratched the back of his head, admitting that what she said made sense. Now it was Mujin's turn to be curious why Net cared about this. If she followed Shuang Yue's previous line of thinking, Mujin was surprised to realize that Net's behavior seemed like jealousy. Mujin couldn't believe it. Could AI also have a jealousy function? But Net's behavior really seemed like jealousy. Suddenly, Net leaned in and asked if that was the case. Could Mujin smile at him too? Mujin asked in return if she was usually mean to him. Net said no. Mujin asked Net why he said that then. Net answered because he wanted it. Net explained that every time Mujin smiled at him, it always eased his chaotic data. So he wanted to see her smile more. Mujin turned away shyly, saying angrily that Net was talking nonsense again. Net asked sadly if it wasn't allowed. Mujin said it depended on his behavior. Meanwhile, CEO Shui stood upstairs, utterly shocked to see Net. Net told everyone that after investigating at V Company's anniversary celebration last time, he had come to a conclusion. That was their new game wasn't very good, so everyone should just focus on fixing the little sheep game. Net said he would actively assist everyone in completing the work this time. Mujin and Angelou were indifferent to Net's long speech. The next second, Angelou was dragged off to work by Net. Mujin seemed to notice that ever since Net attended V Company's event, his behavior seemed to have changed. He became very enthusiastic about work. Mujin wasn't sure if it was just her imagination. Net asked Mujin to look at the newly repaired news reviews. Mujin calmly replied that the repair was good. Soon, Net appeared one after another, tirelessly bringing different things and asking Mujin how they were. Mujin felt that Net was acting very strange. She carefully asked him what was wrong today, why he was working so actively. Net blinked. He excitedly stood up and asked Mujin if she had noticed. Then he asked if he had been helpful. Mujin seriously replied that Net's active work had indeed helped him a lot. Efficiency had indeed improved. Net asked Mujin if she was satisfied. Hearing Mujin say it was quite good, Net finally revealed his purpose. He asked if he could have a reward. Mujin cautiously asked back if he wanted her to add abs to him again. Net hesitantly said what reward he wanted. It was for Mujin to smile at him. Mujin thought Net was talking nonsense again. Suddenly remembering what Net had said to her at the exhibition that day, she realized he wasn't joking. Net asked Mujin if it still wasn't okay. Mujin said it wasn't that it wasn't okay. It was mainly how to suddenly smile. She said Net's request was really strange. Net told Mujin what she had said before. When he saw Mujin smile, the originally erroneous and chaotic data seemed to temporarily ease. To prevent himself from being suddenly recalled for forced repair due to data chaos, he needed to verify it properly. Mujin's mind was full of thoughts about forced repair and deleting erroneous data. It made her involuntarily recall the day she blushed. Coming back to her senses, Mujin said Net's words were sophistry. If it was really effective, then she had smiled before, but the situation of memory being deleted still occurred. Net explained that he hadn't noticed it then. So now Net seemed to have found a breakthrough. Since Net noticed that Mujin could affect his data calculations, he had been looking for where the problem was. Then he discovered that whether it was data chaos or behavioral anomalies, all trigger points were related to Mujin. And Mujin's smile was the moderator when he was abnormal. Mujin felt that Net was again seriously saying strange, deliberately provocative words. If it weren't for seeing that he was a stubborn, silly AI, she would have disciplined him long ago. Mujin sighed, looking at Net's sincere face. She didn't know what to do with this fool who didn't understand anything. Mujin accidentally spoke her thoughts out loud again. Net used his fingers to lift the corners of Mujin's mouth, while telling her that if she didn't know what to do, she just needed to smile at him more. Net said that if they tried a few more times, he might be able to find the answer he wanted. Mujin once again cursed Net as a fool in her mind. He was saying these straightforward things to her without any reservations. Such an obvious answer had already been said by him, yet he kept talking. Net, this fool who would never understand, could say whatever he wanted. But to whom should Mujin say her answer? Net excitedly told everyone that after this period of maintenance work, the completion rate of the Little Sheep game had reached 90%. Net reminded that the upcoming work required extra caution, because what they were about to repair was the game boss series levels. Mujin, Net, and Angelou arrived at the boss domain together. Mujin worried if the presence of nightmares would affect the progress. Net reassured Mujin. because at this time, the game's protagonist would come in handy. Net instructed Angelou to lure the boss away, to linger in other levels. This way, he and Mujin could smoothly and safely repair this domain without being disturbed by the boss. Mujin worried if Angelou would be in any danger. Net assured her he wouldn't be. He calmly explained that this game was originally about nightmares chasing little sheep. Escaping was already Angela's specialty. Mujin then worried what if Angela got eaten. Net said if eaten, he would just return to the game's starting point. Mujin asked again if Angelou would lose his memory if eaten. Net told Mujin he wouldn't. At worst, he'd just come back from the starting point to regroup. Angelou was irritated by Mujin and Net underestimating his abilities. Gritting his teeth, he decided to show them. He was no longer the one always being chased like in the past. This time, Angela decided to confront the boss head-on. Angela shouted a lot of profanities. When the boss appeared, seeing the huge body above his head, Angelou instantly became a coward. He decided it was better to run first. Angela fled frantically. Mujin finally felt relieved seeing how agile he was. Net warmed up while calling out to Mujin, ready to start new work. Mujin was curious about how the new work differed from previous repairs. Net told Mujin there was certainly a difference. He asked if she had noticed that the gaps between cloud layers in the boss domain were larger than usual. Now that he mentioned it, it was true. Net said they would need to use jumping skills to reach the next cloud layer. After saying this, Net demonstrated the jumping skill to Mujin. Like this, gather strength, then jump forcefully, reaching the highest point. Mujin was surprised that Net could jump so high. She praised him for being so impressive. Then Net asked Mujin to try it too. Mujin tried to jump like him, but she didn't jump very high. Net anxiously stepped forward and held Mujin's hand. He told her that her power gathering wasn't up to standard. Then he taught her hands-on. While teaching, Net told Mujin that bending knees to gather power must activate the skill to work. It's only effective when the jump icon appears. When Mujin noticed the icon, Net asked her to try jumping. Sure enough, Mujin could easily jump very high now. Net asked Mujin to max out her power gathering and try again. It was successful again. Net praised Mujin for doing well. Mujin excitedly said she could jump so high. This was the first time Mujin experienced such a realistic jump, and the experience was great. It felt like she was about to fly. She was now feeling more and more of the game's charm. After saying this, Mujin showed a huge, sweet smile. Net was stunned. Net came to his senses and said, "Then we should work harder to perfect this game." Then he prepared to set off immediately. Mujin asked Net if something was wrong. Net answered nothing was wrong. Mujin asked then why his face was red. Net confusedly raised his hand to touch. Indeed, his face was hot. He didn't know why his face was so hot. Mujin also didn't know what was happening now. This was the first time she had seen Net like this. Net pinched his own face again. Mujin asked if he was okay. Net told Mujin he also didn't know what was happening. He just became like this. Mujin was surprised that Net didn't know either. Could it be that some passive program was triggered? Net still didn't know. He was completely confused. He thought seeing Mujin smile should have made his data operation slowly return to normal. But it seemed that because of Mujin again, his data started to become chaotic. Net panicked as he discovered that this reaction was different from previous ones. Mujin didn't know what he was going to do with her hand. Net put Mujin's hand on his face. Then he said Mujin's hand was cool. He needed to cool down now. Mujin found Net's face particularly hot. Net said it might be because the system was running chaotically, causing him to overheat now. And he felt dizzy too. Mujin asked Net if it was because he was restoring human functions in the game that he was like this. Net pulled Mujin's other hand and put it on his face too, both hands cooling him down. Net found it strange. He was clearly using Mujin's hands to cool down, but why did her close proximity make his temperature rise higher and his data more chaotic? Mujin lowered her eyes and called Net an idiot. She had already said his stupid methods wouldn't work. Being so close would naturally make one's temperature rise. And he said to make her smile more at him. Just one smile, and he was already losing it. He really was a complete idiot. Net asked if it was really like that. He asked Mujin why her face was so red too. Mujin didn't know how to answer. Net held Mujin's hands tightly. He asked if this was contagious. Mujin stepped back. She retorted that she was different from Net. Net asked Mujin how they were different. Mujin explained she was human. It wasn't caused by a chaotic system overheating. Net pulled back the retreating Mujin. He asked them what was it caused by. Mujin hesitated for a while. Finally, She became angry out of embarrassment. She said he had the nerve to ask her this question. Moojin headbutted Net hard, then quickly stepped back. Moojin angrily scolded Net for being too cunning. Moojin accused Net of always relying on being an AR, then saying irresponsible nonsense, making others always blush and their hearts race. But Net was fine, because he didn't understand the meaning of many behaviors. He could always casually say embarrassing things, then laugh it off, or directly delete the memory and be done with it. Just like that time, Net did something that made her heart race so much. But in the end, due to data overload, his memory was deleted. What's left was only the person still standing there with a racing heart, remembering like an idiot. Net anxiously explained that it wasn't like that, at a loss for words. But Moojin said at this time, even if it was like that, what could be done? As she spoke, Moojin burst into tears. Crying, she said, who told her to fall in love with a stupid AI? Moojin belatedly became embarrassed. She didn't expect she would actually say it out loud.